to it. We're going to be continuing part 2 of the Unholy Trinity by Wendigoon. I really enjoyed the first part, as you know, I watched 2 hours of it straight, so definitely interesting where the story goes and you know what happens. I think my favorite character is it's not the main character, it's the other priest that was I forgot his name. That was watching over the crawling guy in the beginning. I forgot his name was. But yeah, he's my favorite character for sure. I'm glad he made a cameo in the end, even though the second part was an entirely dream sequence, which is a little bit disappointing, but it's also like, it's alright. It survives in the game. I'm guessing probably not, as far as I'm aware. I'd say maybe one person would survive. I don't think the main character would survive, but maybe one character. Or maybe the deer kill. Maybe the deer kill everybody, you know? That's also a possibility. The deer could be out for blood. The deer gang could kill everybody. That is always a possibility in this world. That is always gonna be a possibility. Deer gang rise up. Anyways, YouTube, I did record this all live on Twitch, so you want to be here and be part of the madness, you know, do follow me on Twitch because that helps out very much. And if you enjoy the video, want to see more of my content, because I do upload 2 videos a day, don't forget to like and subscribe to the video. Besides that though, you know, let's just get somewhat like right into it. You know, I'm curious to see where this goes, you know, and what mysteries and stuff we unlock on the way. Let me just make sure I have everything right here. Should be about ready to go.
And that went wrong as well. And chapter 2 ends with John Ward driving away, determined to save Jason and Nate Martin with the aid of Father Garcia, but the cult is hot on his trail, ready to stop him.
Yeah.
And of course, at the end of all of this, the question, who's Gary? All of that will be revealed as we get in to chapter 3.
Right.
Now, in the previous sections, I've explained how the game normally goes, and then the alternate paths or secret endings you can take. However, chapter 3 is kind of defined by its...
Chat, stop. It's a too big game, or so yeah, it's a too big game. It's a big game. Stop. Stop.
secret ending, and also the chapters sections themselves make the most sense if you do the secret steps as you're playing through it. So we're going to talk about the methods and path to get the secret ending on our first talk through. With that, chapter 3 begins with a flashback. That flashback is to September the 21st, 1986, which means now we're going back to the night that was mentioned in the notes from chapter 1. The first night that Father Ward and Father Alred went to perform an exorcism on the young Amy Martin.
Oh, we gotta flash back to the back of the van. Ah, first exorcism ever. Okay. That's father to you. I know it's technically how that works, but it's still kind of funny when I think about somebody just telling me that.
John seems afraid, but Alred assures him that if he just follows Alred's lead, everything will be fine. When they arrive to the house, we see this cutscene of Alred and Ward stepping into the house. I can't explain why, but for some reason I really like this cutscene. It goes to show how rotoscoping can be used effectively just to portray emotions, because John has this sense of fear or anger almost in his eyes, like he's ready for a fight, while Alred seems so peaceful and calming. Another thing to mention about the rotoscopes, and I'll throw some examples on screen now, but Erdorf used himself or his family for a lot of the reference models for how to draw the rotoscope scenes out. So a lot of these scenes are just Erdorf acting out the motion and then painting over it and translating it into the game.
That's
that
cool.
Doesn't really affect the story at all, but it was cool and I wanted to mention it.
It's a nice fun fact that shows you how a person's little like creativity and stuff like that just helps out a lot in his project, and how much, you know, he's like himself is trying to make this all work and seem good and seamless. And you know what? For all intents and purposes, it pretty much came out looking pretty nice.
Similar to the notes from Chapter 1, as the Martins answer the door, Bob Martin says that he had to tie Amy up in the basement, and he clearly feels remorseful about it. John and Alred understand and begin to walk downstairs to see Amy. A few things to note if you don't immediately go downstairs to continue the story. If you walk to the fridge, you can see a drawing of 6 children. 6 kids, of course, being in reference to the missing children debacle. After going into the basement, Alred and John stand before Amy, and initially, Amy remains silent.
Well, we know this goes wrong, right? There you are.
At this, John awakes in bed. As you could imagine, the flashbacks to the Martin household were a part of his reoccurring nightmares. But at the same time, it also allows us to see exactly what happened on the night of September the 21st.
Yeah.
The screen then tells us that it is 3 days till the profane Sabbath. The profane Sabbath is the thing Father Garcia mentioned in his note at the end of Chapter 2. And while we don't know what the profane Sabbath is yet, it's probably bad and they should probably stop it. Upon waking up, we can find the letter from Molly and the letter from Garcia at the end of Chapter 2. But now we have another note from Father Garcia.
John, I can't find Nate and Jason Martin in the state foster care system. It's possible that, after what happened last year, they went to live with relatives. I will try to find out what I can. Meanwhile, go investigate the clinic where Amy worked. We must find the place where they intend to summon Malphus and disrupt their plans. Vaya con Dios. Father Garcia.
So Malphus is...
I was a little confused at what he meant there in the ending, because I was like, that's not the proper translation. I was like, oh, probably can't read that well, because it's Spanish. Vaya con Dios. Even though my version's not the best. Vaya con... No. ¿Por qué lo estoy diciendo así? Es como si no puedo decir nada. Es que estoy hablando. Vaya con Dios. Yeah. No, I'm saying fine. I'm okay. Passable at best.
Once again, a very powerful demon in Christian and Judaism lore. And since John and Garcia have been unable to locate the twins, Garcia is now looking for them in the foster care system, informing John that he should go check out the clinic that Amy worked at. If you'll remember, all the way back in Chapter 1,
Amy worked at a clinic,
and that her mother's religious friends weren't very happy about this. But we also saw in one of the non-canon endings that Amy was working at that clinic and being directly influenced by this Gary figure while she was there. So, as Garcia's deduced, perhaps the clinic has something to do with whatever's going on. Another thing I want to mention now is how in the first place did John and Garcia find each other, right? Because they've never met each other in person, again, besides the wood thing, and all of Chapter 2 was a dream. Given that John was having dreams about Father Garcia and about the twins and Amy's possession and whatnot, it's safe to say that Garcia was also having dreams and visions about John. We'll find out later in Chapter 3 that the two of them have never actually met in person, but somehow they've come into contact. Keep that in mind, that somehow the two of them came to know each other, and now they're both pushing forward to the same goal.
That's kind of suspicious. That's kind of suspicious, I'm not gonna lie.
Immediately travel to the clinic, or we can walk down the street and look into the 2 houses next to John's house. One house has a small child watching the television, and the other house has a family sitting around the television. Depending on what's going on in the game, or which day during Chapter 3 you check in on these windows, different things will happen. If you keep playing the game wrong, which we'll talk about in a minute, the scenes inside of the houses become progressively more demonic. But there's also some fun Easter eggs as to what's actually happening on the TV screens that, again, Airdorf and I talked about in our interview. Anyway, from leaving John's house, we can get in the car and travel to the clinic.
Watch out for the deer,
While walking around the street of downtown, the first thing that we'll notice is that the front door to the clinic is barred up, with a police officer standing guard out front. The cop tells us that we're not allowed inside and better be on our way. While exploring...
It might be crazy, but is the cop part of the cult? And are they technically guarding an area where nobody would look, nobody would question, but he's part of it and he's making sure nobody's going in there to interrupt anything, you know? That could be it. I could be right. Thank you for the follow. I appreciate it. Thank you. Ow, that was not necessary. But he might be right. This might be what he's doing. He's trying to this cop here might be there just to stop anybody from finding out that this is a ritual place. This might be the key.
In the streets around the downtown, we'll see that the town itself is in a state of disrepair. Most of the buildings are boarded up and nearly everything's covered in graffiti. One rather ominous thing we can find is this image of a dead bird in an alley, and the bird's just there and dead, and we get to see it up close.
I see.
For some reason, I guess. Also, while walking up and down the street, a truck will drive by that has a thrall in the driver's seat. This keeps in mind that the cult is always watching. After walking behind the clinic, we find an entryway in through a broken window.
Welcome in. Hope you enjoy my antics of just deep diving into a lot of different lores. You know, I very much enjoying just doing a lot of stuff. I need to do maybe another video on that, but I feel like I'm spamming them too much.
And from there, we can see what this clinic's about and why it's been recently shut
that's
down.
Normal.
Beginning with a note that we find near the front door of the clinic itself.
I don't think it's a ritual site.
Erics from Gary Miller.
Oh my god, it's internet historian again. I can't take this VA seriously. Have you seen the lore of FNAF? Oh yeah. I did a whole deep dive on my channel. I did like a FNAF supercut lore. And then again, I'm already into the lore. Like I have books, I played some of the games, but I watched a lot of like different theories and all that. Yeah, big FNAF fan. Ow. Anyways, I can't take this VA seriously. Like I can't. Hi, Rhonda. Just a couple of reminders after last week's visit. Please keep your desk titty. Our patients need to feel at ease with their healthcare experience. And then what he's gonna do in that type of tone.
Fax 081-785-002.
Hi,
Rhonda. Just a couple of reminders after last week's visit. Please keep your desk tidy. Our patients need to feel at ease with their healthcare experience. Remember our sales points. Clean, quick, courteous. Do not return any calls from the Department of Health before notifying me first or leaving a message for Tiffany.
We cannot afford another surprise inspection.
Please do call me on my direct personal line if you happen to hear back from Mrs. Martin. And one more thing. Keep Jeffrey out of sight. Remember, Gary loves you.
I cannot take it in his story. I can't take his monologue seriously, but it's hilarious.
This clinic is effectively a prenatal care clinic. In other words, it's a clinic that would help do things like monitor pregnancies, or provide supplements or vitamins or checkups or what have you, or deliver babies. And typically it would be a clinic like this that would also offer abortion options or pregnancy terminations, which would make sense why in chapter 1, Amy's mother mentioned that her religious friends didn't like Amy working down at the clinic. So this would be the kind of clinic that would normally offer this kind of thing, and maybe they even advertise that they offer it. But as we're going to find out, they weren't doing a whole lot of that for one very not good reason. But for all we know now, this facility was effectively a pregnancy care clinic. And of course, the fact that that fax was written by Gary Miller. So whoever this Gary guy is, he owns a pregnancy care clinic for some reason. Like his day job's delivering babies, and in the night he just decides to lead a murder cult for funsies. Walking through the rest of the clinic, you can see again that it's an abandoned facility.
I think there's a crowbar up there.
But after exercising an IV drip, we get this note.
Note to self: pills do not dissolve in IV drip well. Too weak. Patients waking up before process is complete.
Oh!
Sooner or later they will realize they are having the same hallucinations. Suggest concentrated, injectable version.
Now, this has nothing to do with pregnancy, probably.
Yeah.
This is someone manufacturing a sort of hallucinogen, or at least a pseudo-hallucinogen, because, like they said in the letter, eventually the patients are going to realize they're having the same dreams. And it seems this facility was used as a front to manufacture whatever drug this is. While exploring the clinic, John will find a boarded-up door. As soon as he starts to walk away, this thing throws open the door and drags John kicking and screaming down a staircase. We get a cutscene of John tied to a stretcher and before he hears some creature getting closer. We then switch back to playing as John, now again tied to a stretcher, and we have to roll John behind cover before the demon comes back and finds him. As soon as the demon leaves, we can make our way back to the staircase, and once we get there, the cop from earlier, who probably heard all this commotion, unties us from the gurney. When John and the cop get back to the entryway of the clinic, suddenly, the demon from before flies in through the window. We get an interesting sort of mini-boss here, where John has to hold the cross on the demon to slow it down while the cop shoots it. This can be very janky since the cop's AI is not the best, but eventually the demon will go down. John and the cop escape the clinic, but before the...
That's so cool. I still think the cop's a bad guy. I for some reason, I don't know, something's telling me the cop is evil. The cop is evil. It's evil. Something's about it. I don't know. I'm telling you, there is evil in this house. He cannot be trusted. He cannot be trusted.
The cop can ask himself any real big questions about what he just shot, or do demons exist, or what does this mean about the afterlife? There's some hippies setting his car on fire. Or at least he refers to them as hippies. They're actually thralls, of course. And the cop chases them just off screen.
Oh,
if we follow where they went, we can see that the thralls took the cop to a back alley and murdered him. What's left of him remaining a pile of blood and bones strewn across the ground.
Already?
And I guess now we know why that dead bird was there a minute ago. Now, if you're playing through the game and you're either not aware or not interested in its secret endings, then this is where you can end the first day. All you have to do is go get back in John's car, he'll drive back to his house, and then day 2 will begin. And as far as John knows, the clinic was a dead end, the thing's been shut down, and there's no information about the cult or no further information about what happened to the twins or
are we going to go ahead and check on the houses?
But to begin unlocking the secret ending, we venture back into the clinic. John makes his way all the way back into the clinic until he arrives at the stretcher he was once tied down on. You'll be given a prompt asking if you want to lay down on the gurney again. Of course, any reasonable person would say no, but this is John Ward we're talking about, so of course he voluntarily ties himself back on. If John, now on the stretcher, wheels himself to the pile of bodies over to the left side of the screen and waits there for some time, eventually another door will open. Something to keep in mind is all of the people on these stretchers seem to have a distinct hole carved into their face. Whatever this hole in the face is, as we've established at this point, it's definitely related to the cult. If John goes through the doorway, we're treated to the best cutscene in the entire game, as we can hear John screaming in 8-bit audio as his gurney flies down the staircase.
Are they gonna kick him down? What's even happening? They're splitting up by mitosis.
Upon reaching the bottom, his gurney breaks, and he is now able to walk freely. He enters a room, and inside...
If there's a hole, there's a goal. Shut up! Just because people have a hole in their face doesn't mean it's a goal. Please, chat. Stop being unhinged. Please, I beg you, be normal.
He sees what appears to be a woman holding a baby.
Oh.
And upon approaching her, this scene plays out.
I'm looking short with boys, named Jason Martin. Have you seen them? Who's Gary? I'm leaving now.
That's a good reaction. You know? Yeah, I have some places to be. They want to feed me.
Now we're given the actual
little demon baby. Little demon baby. No, football kick it. No, thank you. Back off. I'm not screwing around with that. We're shoot it. So Gary's a baby. I can't see the screen. what that screen that well. I'm guessing no. I don't think Barry Gary's a baby. I think it's just I feel like I don't know. I feel like probably I'm thinking Gary might be either the leader of the cult or just a follower of it, or you know, um, I don't know. I don't think he's a demon though. I feel like that's too on the nose. It's kind of too obvious if he's a demon. I feel like it'd be too obvious, be too play. I wouldn't feel like there's a twist at any time. The snail? What do you mean the snail? Shoot the baby immediately. If it's demon possessed and there's no chance of saving it, then hell yeah.
Classified of the clinic. As babies, or at least what appears to be babies, pour out of the wall and begin to attack John. The cross will ward them off pretty quickly, but the babies will alternate between attacking John and attacking the woman. After fully covering the woman, she becomes much more powerful and effectively impervious to the cross attacks. And while they can't actually hurt John, they can slow him down. The best strategy here is to just focus on the woman and pretty much ignore the babies. The only time they become a problem is when they build up a pile of themselves and become this really fast baby mech thing. And then if that happens, that becomes your priority, but for the rest of the time, just focus on the woman. Eventually, she'll be defeated, and we are now allowed to leave the clinic. As we make our way
we
out
beat
of the
the
clinic's
babies.
basement, we find another note.
Smooth moves, priest. But the twins are not here. Carry out the works of your God, while it is yet day. For the night cometh.
Remember,
Gary
Gary loves you. Gary
So for
loves
one,
you.
she mentions that the twins belong to Gary, which is, of course, ominous. But when
Yeah.
we ask about Gary
Yeah.
specifically, she says, Gary is a normal human being just like you and me, which is not a thing that people feel the need to say about normal human beings.
Yeah.
And it of course raises the question of what on earth was going on at this clinic. Because we saw the note that the pills weren't working enough to put people in these hallucinatory states of mind and an injection's needed, so there was some kind of drug being developed. But then in the basement, there's like hundreds of babies, or babies, whatever those things were. And while we maybe defeated a bunch of them, and whatever that woman was doing down there with all of the babies, but what were they even for, right? More on that later. You're not going to like where it goes, but there will be more. That would be a good motto for the channel at this point. You're not going to like where it goes, but there will be more. Now, after leaving the clinic, getting in our car and traveling home, we see a short cutscene of what looks like this big altar slash sacrifice slash, I don't know, some demon room that has a large cryptic symbol.
I'm assuming that's a gateway. That's a gateway that's either gonna let Gary out or let us into the area to stop Gary. Or quote unquote stop Gary.
In the middle of it, when suddenly a third of that symbol disappears. If you didn't go back into the clinic and fight
Secret
the
ending.
mom demon baby thing down in the basement, then this cutscene wouldn't play out. That's because going back in and defeating the mother is one of the 3 steps to achieving the correct or good ending. There will be one of these secret side quests in each of the 3 days we're going to play through, and the player has to complete all of them in order to fully unlock the end game. You don't need to know what that room is yet, or what the symbol we just saw part of it disappear means. All you need to know is that we're on the right track. So now as we head into our next day, John has another dream.
That's very on the nose. Oh, a sequel to the part we saw in the beginning.
This stream picks up right where the previous one left off, of John's exorcism of Amy back in 1986. As Father Alred holds up his cross, he tells John to recite the exorcism. However, while John is giving the exorcism, Bob and Cindy come downstairs. Both of them are, of course, scared, and the demon inside of Amy begins to yell at them in Amy's voice. Alred tells John to get the parents out of there, so John takes the 2 of them back upstairs. After the 2 remark that that's not their daughter, John goes back downstairs to help Father Alred.
And he's already knocked out.
However, when John arrives back downstairs, Amy is gone and Father Alred is laying across the floor. Scrawled next to him are the words, "Take it, save her." And from there, John picks up Father Allred's crucifix and is ready to make an attempt to save Amy Martin.
At
this
attic.
moment, John once again wakes up, and we are told that it is now 2 days before the profane Sabbath. Once again, John walks to his front door, and this time we find that there are 3 letters lying on the floor for us to pick up. The first of which is another letter from Father Garcia.
John, there's an apartment building in New Haven where they may be attempting to summon Malthus. I'm not able to go there myself. It's up to you to stop their rituals. Vaya con Dios, Father Garcia.
So after the clinic, for some reason, the cult is trying to take over this apartment building, which means that's our next target. However, there are 2 letters left for us to pick up.
Yeah.
Both from someone named Lisa.
John, for now, this is the only way I can contact you. I think they're watching me. I need you to come over as soon as you can. The situation has gotten much worse. My address.
An apartment area. I'd be suspicious.
Is 665 Orange Street,
Suspicious.
apartment 5A, New Haven, Connecticut, 06511.
Suspicious.
Thank you, Lisa. P.S. If for some reason I don't answer the door, get the spare key from my friend Tiffany.
And then this note is followed by,
I don't know if you're getting my letters or not, but I hope you'll be here soon. I really need your help. They're in the apartment. I see them all the time now. I can hear them in the darkness. I haven't slept in days. When you get here, just come straight to my place. Tiffany can't be trusted. Don't talk to my neighbors either. They won't let me leave. Lisa.
so whoever this Lisa is, she lives at the apartment building mentioned in Father Garcia's letter.
Yeah.
And somehow, she knows John. Now, we know this isn't a love interest because Molly was John's love interest.
Yeah.
Remember that whole note where she's like, I can't do this anymore, but I'll always love you? So we can assume that John and Lisa aren't a romantic relationship, but they definitely have some kind of relationship. So we leave in our car and make our way over to the apartment building. Walking to the apartment building, we can see that it's a rather large structure of several floors. We can also assume that this entire thing is infested with cult members. If as soon as we walk into the apartment building, we take a left to get to the mailboxes, we find another note lying on the ground. This note is also our first clue, if it wasn't obvious enough from, Garcia telling us the building's probably overrun, that something has gone terribly wrong.
Hello, Mr. Ward. I am sorry to have worried you. I am perfectly fine. I have not been feeling like myself lately. However, I am much better now. Please do not trouble yourself with coming to visit. I have decided to take an extended vacation in the country, so you will not find me at home.
No, we're too late.
Sincerely, Lisa Pearson.
So this is clearly not Lisa,
Yeah.
but for some reason, the cult wants us to think that it is Lisa. For whatever reason, they don't
Well, I guess we don't have to worry about her. I mean, she said she's fine. We could just go ahead and skip to the, where Father Garcia wanted us to go.
want John meddling in whatever they're doing here. It also implies that something bad's probably happened to Lisa.
Yep.
Also, if you continue left and try
She's
to make
dead
your way
or
down
possessed.
to the basement, you'll find that the basement is pitch black. And after walking in there for a short amount of time, a thrall will come up behind John and murder him. So we probably
We
don't
don't
wanna do
go
that.
there.
I don't know, unless you're like really frustrated with John at this point for some reason. Going the other direction, we can choose to either use the elevator or the staircase to work our way between floors. And while exploring the layout of this apartment building, we can see that, yes, in fact, things aren't great here. Between the combination of creepy notes, shattered mirrors, and rooms in disrepair, it seems that the cult has infested every aspect of everyone who lives here. So, let's analyze what's so messed up about this setting. The first thing I want to mention is Lisa's friend who also lives in the apartment, Tiffany. Now, if you'll recall, Tiffany was mentioned all the way back in the letter we found from Gary over at the baby clinic. And of course, in Lisa's letter, she says that Tiffany can't be trusted. We get our first clues as to Tiffany's whereabouts in room 2A, in which we find a note written by her.
Every initiated follower knows that in order to bring about the second death, one must sacrifice 7 by passing them through the carved out of the impure vessel's face. Then shall the unspeakable reward the with the second death. Such was the fate of that whore Amy. My beloved Gary has set his sights far too low. I will surpass her.
So this sounds like an acolyte of
Yeah.
the cult who's so in love or enamored with Gary that she's jealous that Gary has chosen Amy to set his sights on. We'll see more of Tiffany's actions here in a moment. Also, in that note, she mentioned carving out one's face, which is, again, very similar to the
hand.
people with holes for faces that we've seen earlier.
That would come out
We're
their
getting more
face.
hints as to the cult's practices, but we're not there yet. If you looked at all the names on the mailbox on the first floor of the apartments, then you'd be able to see that Lisa's room is room 5A. But if John goes there now, the door will be locked, meaning we need to find a key. There's also a cross line out front of her room, which I'm sure isn't anything important. But if you'll remember in that
Probably
note,
is.
Lisa said that she may leave something with Tiffany. And we can see from the mailbox that Tiffany's room is room 3B. So we go to the third floor to investigate. Another clue that something not good is happening in this apartment is this note we find outside of the elevator asking us to play the elevator game.
Oh.
And given the participant of the game that we can see on the note, that's something we probably don't want to do, but will likely end up doing anyway. This is only half of the full elevator game guide, but for now it gives us a hint that there are several demonic forces at play. When we get to Tiffany's room, we can see that, as imagined, it's in a state of disrepair.
On the floor.
There's blood leaking behind
That's
the
so
door
nice.
and static playing loudly on the TV. After we pick up Lisa's key and
Somebody's
begin
gonna
to
break out
make
the
our
door.
way out the door, the face of what appears to be Amy shows up on the television.
Oh,
Now you may
I
initially
see.
think it's Amy because it is a girl with a hole for her face that's kind of the same color that Amy looked like, that kind of light purple tone.
I'm assuming
but if
that's
you look
Lisa
closely,
or
the
Liz.
shade is more of a pink than it is Amy's purple. As a matter of fact, the note we found on the ground earlier that was written by Tiffany is in this exact same color. And given that most of the characters in the game are color coordinated,
Oh,
this
she says the acolyte that would say there would be a much better. Okay, yeah, maybe she did that to herself. Tiffany sold us a knife that broke almost immediately despite spending half our goddamn gold on it. That's you gotta get warranty on that.
is
You know, it's
probably
best for
Tiffany.
best. You know,
So then that begs
you
the
get
question,
scammed.
why is her face also a hole? We make our way back to Lisa's
cross?
room, and after unlocking the door, we can see that there is a second door in the room,
I
this one covered
see.
in a demonic seal. There's also another note that can be found in the room as well.
If you wish to break the seal of Alu, your answer lies in the blood-stained knife and the face hiding in the deep dark. But only those who have ascended to the highest point can descend into the lowest depths.
Oh,
Remember,
that didn't
Gary loves you.
work. Pinch didn't work.
So this
I don't know
seems
why.
to be a sort of riddle as to how to get past this seal. For one, Alu, much like Malthus, is another demon mentioned in Christian and Judaism. One of the chieftains of hell whose job it is to meddle with humanity. So we have to deal with the knife and the face as the note mentions, and also the mention of going to the highest highs and the lowest depths. Well, we know from earlier that the depths of the apartment building is the pitch dark room where you get killed by a thrall.
Okay.
And since the note mentioned a face hiding in the darkness, whatever we're looking for is probably down there.
True,
But first, we have to go
true.
to the highest highs, or the top
The
floor.
roof.
In Lisa's bathroom,
top floor.
we find another key. Also, as you're traversing the apartment buildings, randomly, the elevator friend will appear out of the walls and quickly run at John
That's
before John
ugly
warns
looking.
him off.
Very
before John
ugly
warns
looking.
him off. We can also find more clues about the apartment building by exercising various
There he
things
is.
we come
He's in the
across,
corner.
such as this one on floor 6.
So I finally have my own place in the city. No more annoying roommates. I have a whole apartment all to myself. The building's nice. It seems new. New neighbors are kind of weird though. They're always coming around bringing food and stuff. It's actually making me a little sick. Another thing is the mirrors. They're everywhere in the halls. It's nice because I can look around corners, which makes me feel safe, but it's still weird. I don't know exactly how to describe it, but when I look at myself in those mirrors, I feel like it's not me in the reflection. Of course, when I came home from work today, the elevator didn't work, so I had to take the weird one-way stairs all the way up to the 6th floor. Then I noticed all the mirrors were shattered.
Another strange thing to note while you're traversing the apartment floors is that for some reason, there isn't a 7th floor. If we try to get to the 7th floor from the staircase, there's a wall with a note on it that says there is no 7th floor. And if we go to the 8th floor and try to go down to it, there's a note on a blank wall that says there is a 7th floor. While on the 8th floor, we can let ourselves into room 8A as well. And here, we find a note from Gary detailing Tiffany's situation.
Oh.
Our sister Tiffany has gone against the will of the unspeakable.
Oh, interesting.
I thought I could trust her, but I was wrong. Proceed with the original plan. The woman in 5A will be our vessel. Let her pious friend come to rescue her. The unspeakable shall crush them both.
So this is interesting.
Yeah.
Tiffany, in whatever action she's performed, has gone against the cult and Gary. And of course, the woman in 5A mentioned and her pious friend is Lisa and John. So part of what we're seeing in this apartment building is the cult's doing, and part of it is also Tiffany's doing. Also, last note about the 7th floor thing, if you go to the elevator and just spam the 7th floor button over and over,
Eventually,
like
would
I
it
did,
work?
Eventually, the elevator friend will pop up for a moment before going away. And there's a note that we could find earlier that says
Ew.
those that go knocking on forbidden doors often find the one who guards them. So, assumedly, knocking on the door,
Do we have to do the elevator game to get to that floor then?
aka pressing button over and over, unleashes elevator friend thing. And speaking of the elevator friend, on the 9th floor, we can find this note.
If you're reading this, it means that you've been invited to the Williams family annual Halloween block party. It will be held on Halloween starting at 5 p.m. in apartment 9B. Activities will start promptly, so please do not be late. If you plan on bringing a +1, please let me know in advance. Only friends and family, aka those who receive this newsletter, are invited. Also, just a reminder that this is a family-friendly event, so please leave all overly scary costumes and masks at home. Timmy is still traumatized after last year's incident. I also respectfully ask that you keep alcohol and cigarettes out of the apartment. Also, we do not want a repeat of last year with the power going out, so please bring treats but no tricks. And just another friendly reminder.
What kind of tricks did he have to turn off the power for the whole building? What happened?
That anti-religious or satanic imagery will not be allowed in the apartment. Also, please be aware of Timmy's diet and food allergies, and please be aware he suffers from asthma, so please do not sneak up on him or try to scare him. Again, he still has trouble after what happened last year.
Yeah.
You will also notice that he has a new imaginary friend.
Timmy kind of weak, I'm not gonna lie. Timmy kind of not made for this world. He's gonna get taken out easily. He's got too many debuffs on him, I'm not gonna lie. Timmy ruins everybody's fun. Oh yeah, for sure.
When you see him, please just roll with it. Timmy's therapist says it's healthy for him to have such a coping mechanism. See you all at the party. Can't wait for you all to meet Mr. Miller, who has taken to Timmy so well and has become like a part of the family. Debbie.
For one, Timmy is a nerd and his mother is a Karen. No debate there.
Yeah.
But also,
Yeah.
that mention of Timmy's new imaginary friend is definitely the elevator friend. That's because the drawing of the elevator friend is known as Timmy's drawing. So Timmy has been seeing this creature, and those around him just think that it's an imaginary friend, including, as we see here, Timmy's mom. The other mention is that Mr. Miller has taken a liking to Timmy, and Mr. Miller, of course, means Gary Miller. So Timmy's super dead.
Oh yeah, super dead.
He is talking to a demon who controls secret floors that don't really exist, and the cult leader who is summoning multiple high-powered demons to this apartment building has taken a liking to him. So I'm not sure where Timmy is now, but he's super dead. Eventually, after warding off...
I can't help but be reminded of South Park Timmy. Problem is, I've actually never really watched South Park. So, unfortunately, besides that, knowing that one kid has the ability to die and get reborn immediately, I have no idea about any lore of that series at all.
Off the elevator friend enough times, similar to Michael in chapter 1, he won't spawn in anymore, and he'll also drop another note. This other note, also written by Timmy, is the second part of the elevator game. Now, the elevator game has to do with the alternate boss fight of the apartment section of chapter 3, or in other words, the complete ending, so we'll get to the elevator game in a minute. For now, we make our way to the top of the apartment building, come across a room labeled M. Now this M could be for management, or it could also be
Markiplier! Sorry, I had to say it.
for Gary Miller. Next to the M room, there is a note on the wall that says, "Sacrifice what you cling to." On entering the room
What, your
M,
cross?
we can see a dumbwaiter on the wall as well as instructions on how to operate it. The instructions tell us to place a sacrifice in the dumbwaiter and to not open the hatch once the dumbwaiter has reached the basement because there aren't enough earplugs for the screaming that can be heard. And as the note said outside, in order to survive, we have to sacrifice what we cling to. So John places his crucifix in the dumbwaiter and sends it to the basement below. I didn't mention it earlier, but now that we have a good view of it, I want to bring up the other change that's happened in John's cross. Remember in chapter 1 it was golden and shiny, and then in chapter 2 it became silver. And here it appears as a sort of brass or bronze. It's as if, as the chapters are going on, John is continuing to lose his faith. And no, not his faith in the existence of God or the existence of the supernatural. I mean, that's been made very apparent to him. But his faith in his ability to overcome it. Think about it. In chapter 1, it was a girl that he had failed to exorcise. That's on him, but that's something most priests would be able to deal with. But then in chapter 2, he begins to figure out that there's a whole cult and there's people being possessed and giving their souls away to this.
And then there's a bunch of other religious people that try to stop him, try to get in the way, try to save these people, and they have all perished. So why would it be different for you? You have just been getting lucky and all that. Oh my God, I feel bad for him in a way, but you know what? Sacrifice Timmy, no!
This monster all over the place. And then come to find out this is something that's been like 50 years in the making with Miriam Bell and everything that happened at the Snake Meadow Hill Church. And now in chapter 3, this cult owns family clinics, they own apartment buildings, they've got all of these named demons from hell spawning all over town. The threat is becoming more and more insurmountable, and John doesn't know if he has the faith to do what he needs to do. And again, we see that in his cross losing its glimmer. Some have pointed out that this doesn't make any sense because if we look at Father Garcia and all of his disappearances, his cross is always a sort of brass or bronze color, and Garcia doesn't seem to be losing the faith. But when you see John's cross in chapter 3 and Garcia's side by side, they're different shades of brown. I believe that Father Garcia's cross is wooden, and this makes sense for his character. He's an older guy, he's firm-rooted and steadfast in the faith, and very traditional. He doesn't need the glimmer or the expenditure of what the crucifix represents because he knows what it represents. As John's cross of metal begins to wane. So now without our cross, we begin to make our way to
You're telling me Garcia's a G. He's the original, right? He's got that old style faith in him, you know?
Basement. However, after stepping in the elevator, and remember we can't take the stairs because the 7th floor doesn't exist, and trying to hit floor 1, the elevator will become stuck on floor 4. After getting out, we see signs that some carnage have occurred, and a rather ominous note lying on the floor.
Gary lied to us. When you see it,
Ooh, who could have thought that the demon would have betrayed their cult? I wouldn't have called that, you know? Who would have thought that the demon probably had their own ideas and own, you know, rules and probably was gonna end up killing all of you for its own greed or any other reasons, you know? I wouldn't have guessed that. I wouldn't have known. What, doesn't care about you? What? But Gary loves you. Of course he wouldn't lie to you. It's not like demons do that to everybody. 4 means death in hotels. Oh, I didn't know that.
run.
We also see a camera lying on the ground with the phrase scrawled next to it, "I saw it." Now, the entire building becomes pitch black, and the only way we can see is by flashing the camera. This creates an, as you could imagine, horrifying circumstance, and eventually we find ourselves back to Tiffany's room. Only this time, after we enter, we see that the bloody door is now open. Again, while taking pictures to see our way, we pass through Tiffany's room and eventually a room that seems to have a cradle in the middle of it with cult members surrounding it. If you walk up to the cult members, you die. So instead, John simply shuffles his way around them unseen. Another creepy note about this segment is it's possible as you're just sitting there flashing the camera, eventually, this face will appear on screen.
Oh.
This is the demon Malthus, and it seems that the cult was successful in summoning him to our world. Eventually, we find ourselves in the previously locked room 3.
Not gonna lie, I thought he looked creepier. I'm not gonna lie.
Only to see that it is the site of a massacre, with blood and bodies everywhere. In the center of the room is a large, star-shaped hole. This is similar to the hole in the ground we saw back in the candy tunnels. We continue to traverse through these back rooms until eventually, we take a picture to see the Peekaboo Demon. He continues to get closer every time we take a picture, till eventually we're back in control and the Peekaboo Demon is right there next to John. Now in the candy tunnels, the rule was to remain still.
Okay,
but as
stop.
the note on the wall said,
Stop.
when you see it, run. So now John runs from it, taking flashes whenever he can to see his layout, and eventually he makes it all the way to room 2B, and from there, down into the basement. Once we make our way into the basement, we find John's cross. After picking it up, we can navigate the room without dying. There are several candles lit across the floor, and similar to earlier boss fights in the game, a creature will appear that can only be seen through the presence of candles. After defeating this demon, John is now allowed to walk across the room. In the basement, he finds another ritual site laid across the floor. This ritual site is very similar to the symbols found in the floor of the Martin household. Perhaps something similar that happened to Amy has happened here. At the ritual site is a mask similar to the one we saw in Lisa's room drawn on the wall. After exorcising it, we receive this note.
My beloved Gary, alas, the mask is already stained with blood, my blood. The ritual is complete. You will not find me on this mortal plane, for I am beyond. Look for me in the unseen world, if you dare. Tiffany.
So, Tiffany has gone against Gary and performed some big huge ritual that has caused a big stink of things, and now she's ascended to some greater plane of existence, at least according to her. There's also this note found on the wall that says not 7, but 70 times 7, which is a reference to scripture when Peter asked Jesus how many times he should forgive the brethren, and Jesus said not 7, but 70 times 7. In other words, Jesus was saying you need to live a forgiving lifestyle and be forgiving of the brethren. There's a difference between, allowing someone to do the same thing again and forgiving them.
Literally wherever the demon's at is where the candles light up. I see.
In your heart, blah, blah, blah. But here, it is a profane use of it for whatever this ritual is. We don't know the details of what happened, but somehow it's related to this, the number 490.
Oh, that one got close.
As John is leaving the basement,
you need to be faster in that quick draw. Oh!
as we'll come to find out, this demon that just possessed John is the demon Alu. And while John seemed to ward it off, we saw what John's appearance became while he was possessed, and the fact that this demon can possess a priest must mean it's pretty powerful.
Yeah.
There's that very creepy moment where John is
But not
standing
strong
there while
enough.
possessed, and he stares at Malthus, and Malthus stares at him, which means he's really staring at Alu inside of John. And it's the very strange moment of these two demons who are older than time as we know it, who, of course, know of each other. And just this silent, understanding between the two that Alu's in there. Very creepy. I love it. If we go back through the route that we went on when we had the camera and we're flashing it to get through that whole maze puzzle,
I wonder if Malthus was still going to be going after him, considering that he might think that Alu is still in it. So he's like, oh, all right, I won't bother him. He's got his own shit going on.
thing. Well, now that we have our cross, we can exercise things through that tunnel to get some more notes, including another note from Gary.
Brothers and sisters, praise the unspeakable. We have been graced with the presence of another great demon. Alu is here. I do not understand his motive, but he has put his seal over the vessel's door. This may be Tiffany's doing, but it may also be a test of our faith. Do not cease to pray. Swallow your pills. You may have twice as many as normal. Seal yourselves in with bricks and mortar. And if that so-called priest shows up, take him and eviscerate him over the altar, preferably while still alive.
Wow, that's a little bit...
Remember.
Oh, wow.
Gary loves you.
What if I'm not into that,
Now,
you
this
know?
is interesting. This sounds like Gary trying to save face. Not even Gary understands what Alu is doing here, and he says it might be Tiffany's doing. Because, for some reason unknown to Gary, the seal of Alu was placed over Lisa's door, or the vessel as he refers to her. So it seems that Tiffany, who we know was jealous of Gary's attention to Amy, then became jealous of Gary's attention to Lisa. So, in order to remain Gary's favorite, she summoned her own demon out of hell, Alu, and then made that demon put a seal on Lisa's door so that Gary couldn't get to her. Which, that is dedication, I have to give her that.
Yeah.
Also, there's that mention Gary says of swallowing your pills and taking twice as much as you normally do.
That might be the
And then there was
hallucination
the mention
pills.
back in the clinic of the pills not being enough and we need to make an injectable version. It seems that there's some sort of drug these followers are taking in order to prepare their mind and bodies, perhaps for possession, perhaps for some kind of ritual, who knows. We can also find this note as well.
Brothers and sisters, this month we will be host to a very special visitor. It is here to help prepare the way for the coming of the unspeakable. Of course, due to its special nature, it has full access to the entire building, including your apartments, bedrooms, etc. If you are lucky enough to see it, you would do well not to approach or speak to it.
Oh, it's probably that demon, the peekaboo demon, right? And this is what they meant with "he lied to us." If you see it, run.
Find a dark or dimly lit area. Try to stay out of its way. One of you will be blessed to find it has made its home in your dwelling. Do not go down into the hole that it makes, no matter whose voice you hear down there. If you believe that your fellow brothers or sisters are inside, please notify me, and I will retrieve their remains in a timely manner. Also, just a friendly reminder that rent
Oh my
and
god,
utilities
the
are due
fact
on
that
Friday.
remember,
Well,
money
get it.
still runs the world.
For one, the idea that Gary is still running the apartments in the midst of all this is hilarious. But also, we know this demon he's referring to that will appear in one of your houses and speak to one of you, and don't do anything, just let him live there. This, of course, is in reference to the elevator friend, and it seems that the host who was chosen for this was Timmy. I think that the hole it will make that Gary was referring to is the hole that we saw in the floor in the room full of carnage. I think whenever one of these demons come out of hell, they physically rip through the ground to make their appearance. Perhaps the elevator friend was responsible for the slaughter that we saw in that room.
Perhaps.
That would also explain why when the
Yo,
peekaboo
fuck Timmy.
demon appeared down in the candy tunnels, that there was the giant star hole in the ground and a lot of people died. After exorcising the other sigils of Alu that Tiffany has placed around the area, such as the eye and the face, the seal over Lisa's door will be open and we can now return to it. Upon making our way back to Lisa's room and then entering through the previously locked door, we find Lisa standing in a room by herself. John begins to talk to her and say that they need to leave before Lisa informs him.
She's evil.
I got here as fast as I could. Let's go, Lisa.
That's not surprising. That's not
Because
surprising.
Lisa is being possessed by Alu. The way this boss fight plays out is Lisa will be possessed and run towards John. During this time, John has to do damage with his cross. This will eventually cause the demon to leave her and then go to one of 5 different statues around the room. The way you can tell which statue he travels to is by whichever version of him moves the quickest.
Back in Lisa.
If you exorcise the statue before the time runs out, he'll fall out of the statue, allowing you to do damage for some time, and then the cycle repeats. If John doesn't find what statue he's in time, Alu will rush into John and possess him for a short period of time. During this time, the message flashes on screen that says, "Fight it, John," and the player has some control as they try to navigate John away from Lisa. If John fails to stay away from Lisa while he's possessed, then John will straight up murder Lisa. And here's the wildest part. It will just end. The boss fight will end right there, and you will be locked out from getting the good ending.
Oh no, Lisa, I'm so sorry.
Oh.
You never made me do it.
Like, that's so sad. We don't know what Lisa's connection to John is yet, but spoilers, the two of them are very close. And then John can just be like, "Don't worry, Lisa, I'm here to save you." And then he gets possessed and murders her, and he's
That's
like, "Oh,
so
I guess I
sad.
gotta go home now."
Yeah,
But we're-
that's so sad, you know? Well, my bad, bro. I got possessed. I killed a friend. Happy's every Tuesday.
We're not doing that. We're not playing these games.
Yeah,
In this
yeah. Thank you for
playthrough,
that, Pets.
we
I
keep
need them.
Lisa alive. Eventually, John defeats the demon and Lisa sprints out of the room. After we step out of the room, we can talk to Lisa
okay, she's
as
alive.
she smokes a cigarette. Lisa confirms that the cult is doing some kind of summoning here, and that John has to hurry to stop them from whatever they're doing next. John asks if Lisa needs a place to stay, but Lisa says that she'll be fine and he needs to get on with it and stop Gary from whatever he's planning. Which, if Lisa's okay with living in this building after everything she's witnessed, then more power to her. And then as John leaves the room, he will remark that it feels that another doorway has been opened somewhere beyond.
The seventh
now, after
floor?
saving Lisa, or alternatively letting Lisa die, but again, we don't play that game. After that boss fight, the player can now drive back to John's house, and the day has been completed, at least on a surface level. But again, we're going for the completionist route, which means we want to figure out what this secret doorway is, which means we gotta play the elevator game. To play the elevator game, we just have to line up the number of floors that are shown at the bottom of both of Timmy's drawings, which means we have to go to the floors 1, 4, 2, 6, 2, 10, 5, 1 in that order. After doing this, the floors will effectively glitch out, and it seems that we are teleported to a sort of another world. Also, right before you hit that last floor while you're on floor 5, there's a high chance that this nice elderly woman will spawn in and walk into the elevator and ask what you're doing. And don't talk to her or approach her because you'll immediately die.
I see.
Mortis.
So ignoring her,
Goddamn,
we get
old
off of
lady.
the elevator at this floor infinity of sorts, and upon entering an
It's
open
Timmy!
room and walking down the hallway,
Timmy!
this scene plays out before us.
Granny suck, you may. Yeah, they do. Is that Tiffany?
My God, Amy.
Oh, Amy's here.
Who's Gary?
Y'all keep saying that. It's
You did this to yourself?
that's um
Tiffany has become so obsessed with the idea of being Gary's favorite that she performed this second death ritual on herself. Seemingly, the normal ritual ends with the participant having their face removed. But as we see here, her entire head has exploded. And what
Yeah.
is hanging out of it is this monstrous beast of some sort, some unholy creature from hell that's still stuck halfway inside of her neck. Not only does she refer to herself as the daughter of the unspeakable, again, the unspeakable is the thing that we have heard reference to several times at this point, but she once again repeats the phrase, Gary is a normal human just like you and me. Of course, this gives us another boss fight. And the music for this boss fight I can only describe as like 8-bit drill theme.
More
but
like
during
repeated.
The fight, Tiffany
what
and
the
this thing in
Shut
her
up,
head
Chad.
will
Shut up.
teleport away from the
My
place.
God, damn! You can't even let me take serious, like scary games serious with that mouth, dude. Shut up, Chad. Shut up.
Before getting close. Very similar to the mirror demon back in chapter 1. However, as each phase of this boss fight ends, this creature will begin pinballing off the sides of the screens in a fit of pain. And as always, if anything touches John in this stage, he dies. Also, if you'll notice, as you attack this demon and as it takes damage between phases, a lot of souls begin to leave it. As a matter of fact, after talking to Erdorf, the exact number of souls that leave this thing is 490. Now, if you remember down in the basement, we saw the number 7 times 70 or 490. Why were there 490 souls inside of Tiffany? You'll find out soon. You're not going to like it, but you'll find out. That's a good second channel motto, or like my number 2 motto for the channel. You're not going to like it, but you will find out. Eventually, Tiffany and the creature inside of her are destroyed. And as John begins to leave the room, right before he picks up the last note, the crawling spider form of Tiffany rushes out at him, but is then quickly destroyed. Tiffany finally vanquished for good. The note that we pick up after this is another taunt from Gary.
Well done, priest. You wasted another day aiding a worthless soul. And you got rid of Tiffany for me. Are you sure you know which side you're on? We'll find out soon enough. Remember, Gary loves you.
I feel like Lisa's dead.
Perhaps this is taunting, or perhaps Gary really did want her gone. From here, we travel back to the elevator and see that there is now a hole in the floor. After continuing to jump through holes in the floor over and over again, we find ourselves on the 7th floor. Since we've now defeated all of the big evils of this apartment complex, the 7th floor has now been reopened. And we quickly see what caused the 7th floor to get sent to the Shadow Realm in the first place.
That's
a giant effigy or some kind of Wicker Man statue coated in blood and entrails is in room 7A. Not only is there a massacre on the statue itself, but we see cleavers and wheelbarrows of meat around the room. Upon exorcising this beast, we see the shape of a young boy disappear at the bottom of the statue. Then, this final note from the apartments appears.
He promised me so much. I just want to see my little boy again. The replacement is almost fully formed. Just a few more bodies.
And with that, we can start to put together some of the pieces of what happened at this apartment building. Of course, Gary's influence is responsible for all of this. He comes to the apartment building, seemingly owns the apartment building, and begins to draw more members into his rituals. Eventually, the majority of this apartment complex is a part of Gary's cult. As they begin to do things like summon Malphus, some of the cult members become enamored with him. Specifically, Tiffany. Tiffany wants to be the most special one and the one to undergo all the rituals and be Gary's main girl. But as Gary turns his attention towards Amy and then later Lisa, she becomes jealous. So jealous, in fact, that she begins her own ritual, seemingly performing the steps of it herself, and summons the demon Alu. She then uses Alu to keep Gary from getting to Lisa, and has, created another demon to wreak havoc on the world. At the same time, we see the suffering that people around Gary are undergoing. Timmy's mother specifically seemingly losing her son to this elevator friend. And then at someone's convincing, either a demon or most likely Gary, she is told that with enough flesh and with enough bodies, she can have her boy back. So then we see what Timmy's mother created, this horrific abomination, this giant figure of worship almost, made out of blood and guts. And despite all the bodies in the room, she leaves in that note that she only needs a few more. Now, we don't know exactly what happened to Timmy's mom. She was possibly killed by one of the demons. Maybe when Alu came forward out of the
thinking
ground,
it's gonna
and
be the
killed her,
the elevator
or
one.
She probably died at some point. I mean, there's so much blood and carnage around the apartment complex. Just take your pick. But I like to think, with exorcising that statue and seeing the figure of Timmy blink away, that we release Timmy's soul from the shadow realm with the elevator friend that we know he went to. There's also the chance near the end of the apartment section that while moving from one room to the other, John can spot the elevator friend and Timmy walking down the hallway. So again, perhaps with exorcising him, we have released his soul into the afterlife. So this is just a microcosm of the destruction Gary is causing, and some of his more faithful acolytes. But now, with Lisa saved, John can return home. And since we also defeated Tiffany, we see another third of that sigil we saw at the end of chapter 1 disappear.
Undone.
With that,
Okay.
day 2 is over, and John returns home to continue his dream.
Looks like there's
the
like
dream
2
picks
more
up where we
steps.
left it last time. John is in the basement now holding Father Allred's cross and goes to find Amy. He walks through the house, although the house seems to be empty. In fact, the only evidence he can find of anyone being there is Bob's glasses. John goes looking for Amy and her parents, moving from room to room calling out their names,
Wow.
before eventually he finds himself upstairs. One thing of note is that whenever John tries to enter the twins' room, despite us being able to enter the bedroom perfectly fine in chapter 1 set in 1987, here in 1986, when John tries to enter the twins' room, it says that he can't remember anything past that. Now, this is likely just because John didn't enter the twins' room in 1986 during the initial exorcism. But still, something interesting to note. John continues on, eventually making his way to the attic. And then upon walking to the back of the attic, he finds Amy.
You're here at rest. Please. Amy, let's go back to the basement. You're Yuri. Let's go. You need to get better. What about there it is? Did she get better?
Lore? Lore?
That's enough.
Lore?
We are doing this here and now. All by yourself. Go ahead. Please, your little stick at me.
Do it.
Father Allred, Mr. Martin. Your body's daddy. Please.
Get up. Put your stance up. Put your dukes up. You got this. Aw, but you didn't see the rest of it.
Now, we're not told here explicitly who Meredith is, but if you remember John's recounting of this event all the way back in chapter 1, he says that the demon used his mother's name. So here, the demon is mocking John for the death of his mother, remarking that he wasn't able to save her. Why does he think he could save Amy?
Okay.
We awake, and the day is October the 30th, one day until the profane Sabbath. Also, if you haven't already noticed, the profane Sabbath is on Halloween, October 31st.
I didn't. I did not.
I mean, if you're going to make a horror game that has to do with demon rituals and summoning dates, why not make it Halloween? For
I
fun
guess.
things. John gets out of bed,
Hey, one day
walks
to
past
Halloween.
the doorway covered in
I
crosses,
guess.
and makes his way to the front door, where there is again another letter from Father Garcia.
John, I'm getting reports of children exhibiting strange behavior at the daycare center on 4th Street. If Nate and Jason are there, then you can bet that it's the place they will try to summon Malthus. There's no time left. Go to the daycare and find out what's really going on. Fear not. Vaya con Dios, Father Garcia.
Again, Garcia is continuing his hunt for the last surviving members of the Martin family, and again trying to stop the cult from whatever's happening at the daycare. The mention about they will try to summon Malthus is interesting. I mean, it can be assumed that John wasn't able to get the information to Garcia yesterday because, again, the events of the apartment building did happen yesterday. But as we saw there, Malthus has been well, good, and summoned. But again, Garcia probably doesn't know that, which is why he's still trying to prevent his manifestation. But still, if the cult's trying to do something at a daycare and they've got 1 demon summoning under their belt, 2 counting Tiffany, they should probably stop him for whatever's going on. So John leaves his house to get in his car and travel to the daycare. Again, you can check out the houses around you to see things progressively getting worse, but we already talked about that, and the story's really getting good. So for now, we travel to the daycare. Before John gets to the daycare, a cop car rushes by him. John, making the call that something may be going on, decides to park just before the daycare and then walk to it. This seems to be the right call, as when he gets to the front of the daycare, it is surrounded by police, all of which have their guns aimed, ready to shoot.
There's a
anyone who
hostage
steps
situation
now,
or
this
what?
is interesting and also makes sense. The cult has been doing more and more overt activities in the past several months. While sure, back during the time of Miriam Bell and even the events of Chapter 1, they were a bit more subtle, residing themselves to the shadows. If the events of Chapter 2 that John witnessed in his dream are occurring around this time, then they straight up murdered an entire SWAT team down in the sewers.
Yeah, I was about to say, the sewer thing where there's people just dying, the cops kind of knew, and all that's like, yeah, then they would have people after them at this point, because they're very much noticed.
And then back at the clinic, sure, the only cop that saw a demon with his own eyes was killed shortly thereafter. That's still a cop that got murdered in broad daylight. Those things tend to cause some investigation. And I mean, come on, we saw the body count that they were getting up to in the apartments. There's no way the police wouldn't notice. And sure enough, it seems they have, as there's dozens of cops who have seemingly cornered Gary. Now, it seems that the cult doesn't really care about this because their plan is to just outrun any resistance they run into. Because at this point they have so much manpower and so much power, and it's just one day till the profane Sabbath, so if they can hold out for 24 hours and enact whatever ritual they're trying to enact, then they're home free. Because you know, what are bullets going to do against the devil? Which it is an interesting point that bullets do seem to have some effect on creatures in this series. Like there's the cop in the clinic who...
I find it very funny sometimes where like, some people are like, how would a gun do anything to a demon? I was like, how would a demon like be able to counter a gun? Is my question.
Shoots the demon to death as John holds his cross up to it. And I think what's happening there is it's possible to kill the physical form these things take on, but not the actual demon, or banish the actual demon back to hell that John's exorcisms
Use
do.
holy
So
bullets?
effectively, guns slow them down or stop the form that they're in, but John's cross is the one that actually kills them. Anyway, because of the police, we can't get in through the front door.
Get somebody to baptize the bullets. Half the price, double the efficiency. You don't have to spray as many bullets, you know? It's a money saver, and it's more better, it's more effective, it's more better for the environment, it's better for the clean up the demons, you know? It works better, it does better, it shoots better, it aims better.
So John has to find a way around back. While walking into the back of the daycare, John finds another note from
Why
Gary.
is there nobody surrounding the building in the daycare?
How do you make a portal to hell? Come and see me, and I'll show you.
Didn't we already get an
Walking
instruction
inside of the
manual
daycare,
for
one of the
this?
first things we'll notice
I feel like we got an
is what
instruction
appears to be
manual for this.
several dead children around some kind of doorway. Now, it's possible...
Families usually want their family back after possession. I'm sorry. I am so sorry, people. But if somebody possesses you, I don't care if you were saved. I am not associating with you. I am not. What do you mean you were a possessed person? What do you mean there was a demon inside your body? You were great, but I am not messing with you. You know, like, I'm sorry. Go find new friends. I'm sorry. Apparently, you were somehow... a demon saw something in you and said, I'm gonna possess that. I'm gonna stay away from you because of that. Because what if another demon comes by or something? I'm just not. No, I'm good. Right back, guys. I gotta go find another VTuber again. Yeah, I mean, you're somewhere else in the internet. You know, that's fine. It's fine.
That these dead people are thralls, considering they're painted red, but also considering that it's a daycare, and we've seen in notes previously that children, or at least the young, can be suckered into what the cult is doing.
Yeah.
There's a solid chance that these kids were used to shut off this doorway or cause some kind of ritual. Walking through the daycare, we can find various drawings made by young children decorated around the walls. Several of them containing red figures or cult members in robes, or depictions of demons following children and their families. In the same room with the dead bodies, we can find a note and this one is in the purple color of Amy's writings.
Mother Moon watcheth her little ones behind a door of sleep. Daughter Chalice is filled, an offering to the Master in the unseen world. Spirit bird arriveth from afar and cometh back to roost. These vessels are the Unholy Trinity. The fallen star shall guide them. What colors can you see? Look to the children if you are lost.
Now this note is interesting for a lot of reasons. For one, it's about to be the answer to the puzzle as to how to get to Gary and the rest of the cult, but there's also a healthy amount of symbolism here. So we know that in Christianity, the Trinity is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. These three make up the Holy Trinity. The Unholy Trinity, as explained here in this note, is composed of the Mother, the Daughter, and the Spirit. The Mother we can assume to be Miriam Bell. She kicked off the occult practices, she began all of the rituals, and seems to be the one who started this entire dive into turmoil. Specifically, the note says, Mother Moon watcheth her little ones behind a door of sleep. And in John's dream about the Snake Meadow Hill Church, Miriam specifically refers to him and the children as her little ones. The daughter we can assume to be Tiffany. It says that her chalice is filled as an offering to the unseen world. Well, for one, Tiffany explicitly referred to herself as the daughter of the unspeakable, and since whatever ritual she did required 490 souls, we can assume that her chalice was filled. And it even mentions the unseen world, the place that Tiffany explicitly says she goes to, and we can only go to after playing the elevator game. And then there's the mention of the spirit bird arriving from far off. Now, you may be led to believe that that means Gary, but I don't think so. Instead, I think the spirit bird is referring to Malphus. For one, Malphus's appearance is very bird-like. He seems to be some kind of demonic crow.
I don't know about
And the
that.
idea of him arriving now and coming to roost kind of implies the ritual they were performing to bring him into this world. I think Gary is the one that's mentioned right afterwards when it says, the fallen star shall guide them. At the beginning of the game, when you boot it up and get the message, Gary loves you, over and over, we see a verse from Revelations 9, verse 1. The verse is, Then the fifth angel sounded, and I saw a star fallen from heaven to the earth. To him was given the key to the bottomless pit. This verse is in reference to the final trumpet sounding during the rapture, or time of Revelations, or Judgment Day, or it depends on your, interpretation of Revelations, but we're not getting into that in this video. The takeaway is that it has something to do with the end times, and specifically, a fallen star who has the key to the bottomless pit. Given that this message, when we boot up the game, is immediately followed by Gary loves you, I believe this fallen star is Gary. As not only does Gary match this description of the fallen star, but he also seems to be leading everyone else on a path to damnation.
Yeah,
Anyway, using
that's
the
kind
hints
of a
about
given.
the chalice and the star and what have you from the poem, we can go to the different kids' drawings around the room, look at their images of the bird, of the chalice and whatnot, and then exercise each of those items in the daycare until they turn the correct color, allowing us to open the doorway and walk down to the catacombs.
Okay, that makes sense.
As we walk down into the catacombs, which I will from here on out be referring to as Garyland, because that's what it's called in the game files, we find our first note.
If you're reading this, then congratulations. You are on your way to experiencing the wonders of our unspeakable future under the guidance of Gary. Gary, our brother. Gary, our friend. Gary, a normal human being.
Why do they all keep saying Gary, a normal human being like you and me? If a bird shits on you, then it's good. On you, it's good luck.
Just like
no,
you and
thank
me.
you. I'd rather not have that
As
on
a
me.
tier 1 acolyte,
Because if a pelican, or if not a pelican, if not a crow, a seagull, poops on me, I'm shooting it. That's not good luck. It did that out of malice. Out of malice.
you are just beginning your unspeakable journey to eventually see what Gary sees and prove yourself worthy to be a vessel fit to experience the second death, reserved for only the most worthy. To find out if you are a vessel, remember to attend meetings of the Eternal Order of the Second Death twice a week. Follow Gary's instructions exactly. Be honest with him in all that you do. Do not ever ask what is behind the door in the basement of the clinic.
So this seems to be a note given to cult members who are just beginning their journey into Gary's cult. Further evidence that Gary is not a human because they keep feeling the need to emphasize that for some reason. And also, the mention at the end, don't ask about what's behind the basement door at the clinic, doesn't mean a lot to us because we did the side quest to get into the basement door and fight the mother demon lady thing. But if you hadn't done that, because remember, all that's optional, then this note would probably turn your head about that.
I just realized something that I never thought about, right? That was like technically an abortion clinic of some kind, right? And all that for babies and everything. Were they taking babies and letting them be possessed? Because they were a bunch of babies just crawling to him. If so, that's just dark. Wow. That's just... Damn.
Yeah, but we're cool, so we're moving on. We continue down the stairs and find another note, this one from Gary himself.
She consumed 6 little twigs. Only 2 were left. To walk as husks. Go ahead, priest. Stare into the eyes of my mother.
Now, that part about she consumed 6 little twigs and 2 were left to walk as husks. 4 and 2. This is definitely in reference to the 6 children that went missing in the 50s when Belle ran the orphanage.
Yeah.
Now, some of you probably heard about the twins who survived all the way back then and heard me talk about twins a lot in
That's
chapter
what I was
2
thinking about.
and thought, oh, well, the twins must mean Nate and Jason, right? However, that timeline doesn't make sense because the current year is 1987 and Nate and Jason are, what, 6 or 7 years old? And this event with Miriam Bell was back in the 50s, so the twins would be grown up by now. Regardless, Gary then tells us to stare into the eyes of his mother. If we walk to the painting in front of us, we can see a painting of Miriam Bell, similar to depictions of her that were seen in chapter 2. The longer we stare at this...
Smash. Oh, never mind. Hell no. Never mind. I regret that. I regret it. Wait a minute. No. No, she was better than me before a couple seconds ago. I swear, chat. I swear.
The more stretched and grotesque it becomes. Until eventually she
No,
degrades
no,
into
no.
a demonic, disgusting form, which opens a doorway and allows us
take
to
backs.
walk through.
No,
Now this is
no,
interesting. Gary
no.
refers to Miriam as his mother. Of course, Gary isn't human, or at least not a normal human. So is Miriam literally his mother, or is this more of a symbolic gesture? We'll find out soon. We come across 2 statues that a note tells us is dedicated by the Save family, the same family who had the tomb back in chapter 2. And just like the tomb in chapter 2, we can use these 2 statues as a save state. Anytime we walk past them, it will save our game's progress. After
that's
exercising one of these statues, we get our note for tier 2
Gary's an
acolytes.
alien.
If
Maybe.
you are reading this, congratulations! You have officially been granted Tier 2 status in the Eternal Order of the Second Death. Upon crossing the threshold from Tier 1 into Tier 2, your life as an acolyte will change dramatically. You may start noticing shadowy figures in the corners of rooms or experience feelings of lost time while holding sharp objects. Ancient symbols written in blood will materialize on the floor and walls of your home. Animals will no longer trust you. You may emit a foul odor that will cause your former loved ones to avoid you. These are just a few of the marvelous blessings that await you in this new stage of life. If you remain loyal to Gary, your journey towards becoming a vessel for the second death will progress to new levels of knowledge and power. Remember, if you neglect your weekly meetings or do not pay your tithes to the order, your fingers will be forcibly bent backwards. Gary loves you.
So the
Thank
cult,
you.
with a little bit of threatening, is continuing.
I guess. You know what? Yeah. Word.
To emphasize the purpose of this cult. It seems that their penultimate goal is to become something known as a vessel for the second death. Now, we're not sure exactly what the second death is yet, but we can put some pieces together. We saw ritual masks and we saw a dagger back in the apartments. We've seen several instances at this point of people or depictions of people with their face cut out, and we saw that Tiffany tried to do the ritual herself and her head effectively exploded.
Yeah.
So for some reason, this ritual entails people putting a mask on their face, having their face carved out like a pumpkin for who knows what reason. Actually, I know what reason. You don't know what reason, but you will soon. And then we'll both know what reason. We continue on a bit further and find what appears to be a sort of chessboard. When we walk into the next room, we can see that the different faces of the chessboard correlate to different movements. So for example, if we exercise one of the faces, it will cause the chairs to mirror. If we exercise another, it will cause them to rotate, etc. And I'll go ahead and tell you now, this puzzle is literally impossible. You're not supposed to solve it, you're just supposed to go back and forth trying to solve it for some time. Eventually, while walking into the room with the faces, a man will jump out from behind a statue and stab John, injecting him with something, causing this to happen.
Oh. Word. Man became liquid. Is he gonna wake up on Halloween Day? Probably.
John has a series of visions, different images of the sun, birds, of nature. The majority of the images we see in this scene correlate to the song King of Pain by The Police. Erdorf envisions the song as a sort of theme song for John and what he's going through. So for the most part, the images we see are an artistic representation of John's state of mind. However, some of these images aren't a reference to the song. Some of them depict things like the Snake Meadow Hill Church and John and Lisa holding hands. As a matter of fact, John and Lisa are together with the 4 other children from the Snake Meadow Hill Church, with Miriam Bell somberly.
What do you mean? I feel like that's something you should remember. I mean, I guess also he was having dreams about it, but I feel like you would have brought this up. This is a good subvert of expectations, but I feel betrayed by the storytelling, by the narrator, by everything, because this is information he should know and we should have been aware of. If they are both from this church and the 2 kids that survived that walk around as husks.
Watching over them. Remember how back in the prologue, or the alternate ending prologue for chapter 2, despite the fact that 12 children in total were killed by Miriam's influence, only 11 showed up while John was on fire. But if you'll remember, Gary's poem said that 2 of those 12 kids were left to walk as husks. And that is because of the 12 children involved in the killings at the Snake Meadow Hill Church, and of the only 2 survivors, 1 was Lisa, and 1 was John Ward. John was one of the children raised in that orphanage by Miriam Bell, meaning that John was one of the children that sang songs with Miriam and nearly gave himself up to the demons that inhabited her. For one, this explains why John and Lisa had such a close connection, and why when Lisa was in trouble, John was the first person she called to. They're twins. And why it's so tragic if you allow John to become possessed and kill her during the fight at the apartments. But the real question this raises is if John even has a chance with any of this. Because think about it, John was one of the children who from a young age was susceptible to Miriam's doing. The investigator mentions when talking to the 2 remaining twins, which we now know to be John and Lisa, that John and Lisa were confused why the investigator didn't ask Miriam Bell herself, because she's right there. And that whole thing culminated with the 2 of them being dragged to the basement by Belle in her demonic state.
But why doesn't he remember
she
any of this?
Perhaps John has always been poised to take over this cult or become one of its high members from the very start. No wonder after chapter 2 his cross goes from silver to bronze. You were once posed to be the subjugation and second in command of a demon, of Miriam Bell, the mother of demons, and you've become a priest. You have gone as far as you can in the opposite direction, only to now realize it didn't matter. That Miriam Bell, that thing that you unwillingly set into motion all those years ago, that is the very chain of events that led to the death of Amy Martin. John has been fighting so fiercely and so strongly for 30 years to change what he's supposed to be.
But if he's an orphan, right? Then why was that demon taunting his mother? You know? If he was like a kid by the point that happened.
But nevertheless, people are still getting hurt. As far as that injection that John was injected with in the first place, that's the injection that we heard referenced in the clinic. We know that the pills are supposed to make you see hallucinations of something, to prepare your mind and body for demonic possession or the second death ritual. And the injectable version is just the stronger form of it. So when John was injected...
No, well, I get that part, but I feel like they made him, like, say you couldn't save her in a way that made it look like he could have done something. But I feel like if he legit couldn't have done anything, he wouldn't have that much guilt over it.
with this,
I don't know, it's interesting that the demon spoke about that specifically.
all of these visions were to prepare him mentally for his place as a ruler or as a subject to demons. And once this entire slideshow of images is over, we simply see the message, now you're ready. So we see the dire straits that John is in now, that his entire life has just been a very long stepping stone to the point that he becomes subject to Gary's demonic takeover, as if the entire game was planned from the start. But before we pick up with John back in the underground catacombs of Garyland, while he is in this state of mind, we continue his dream from 1986. After Amy approached him in the attic, seemingly John ran out and barricaded the doorway, scared for his life. If John decides to not make a sprint for the exit and instead investigate the house, he will find Bob and Cindy's body choked to death with their own intestines. This is the redacted parts of the letter that John wrote to Molly all the way back in chapter 1. It seems that Amy, after disabling Father Alred and distracting John, the demon within her murdered her parents in the most brutal way imaginable. John, scared for his life, tries to get out the door, but before he leaves, he remembers Father Alred. There's actually two ways this dream sequence can end. If, while playing as John, you decide to sprint for the exit, this cutscene will play out. And while this isn't the canon series of events, if you instead go to the basement to try to retrieve Father Alred, who last you saw was lying on the floor, this cutscene will play out.
Is he gonna... Yeah. Yeah, that's messed up.
At that moment, John is more afraid than he ever has been. Amy has murdered 3 people in the household, and it seems is about to murder John as well. But before we can see how that night of September the 21st, 1986 ended, John wakes back up in Garyland. So, waking up after he underwent that hallucination, John walks into the next room to find it is a bloodbath. There are bodies everywhere, stuck to the walls, sprawled out across the floor. One surviving cult member crawls away and as John gets close, begs for mercy. It seems that when John was injected with this drug, he went berserk. It makes sense too. Part of the corruption needed to cause someone to either be possessed or be a part of the ritual would be to give in to their sinful pleasures or sinful desires. And John throughout the entire games has been portrayed as very meek and polite and quiet, perhaps too much so. So when given a drug to let his inhibitions fly and do whatever he wants, John slaughtered everyone. And to clarify, these aren't demons, these aren't ghosts that he killed, these are thralls, these are cult members, people that can bleed. Something deep in John despises this cult, obviously for the actions they did, but also most likely because of his place in it all, because of the root he has.
Bro, when he went asleep, he went John Wick mode, killed everybody. That's crazy. Didn't have a gun or anything. He just had his cross and his faith.
Foundations. Moving forward through Garyland, we find another save statue. Like the last one, we can exercise it to receive another note.
Filthy acolyte. The substance of Gary's influence flows through your veins. You are corrupted beyond repair. Your family and friends have forsaken you. There is no returning from the path you have chosen. Only Gary can save you now. Give up and fully let him into your heart and mind. If you do so, he will make you into a vessel worthy of the unspeakable. Resist, and your soul will be lost forever. Welcome to Tier 3.
While walking through this area, we'll come across a statue of Moloch. Moloch, a figure known for sacrifices, demands that we offer him 3 in order to reach the underground of Garyland. We can tackle these 3 offerings in any order we choose. One requires a game of red light, green light against a statue. Another requires us to step past some cultists and get it out of a room to the far left, but on our way back, the cultists have begun to transform. It seems that the devout cult members or high-ranking cult members have had their bodies transform into whatever these giant pink tendril things is.
Now that I think about it, Gary's a pretty stupid name for a demon. Oh, it's very stupid. I think about SpongeBob's Gary. Gary, what are you doing here down in this cult place? Let's take you home.
To evade them, you just have to wait for them to throw their attack and then navigate it, as it takes them a long time to reset. But of course, and as always, if John is touched by anything, he dies. The last piece of the offering we have to find is at the top of the map, where we see that the offering is on the other side of a mirror. When we get close to the mirror demon from chapter 1 and 2 appears again. In this case, we're not in the mirror realm, but we have to fight it with our reflection that is in the mirror realm. After defeating him, we can pick up the offering and move on. This also makes the mirror demon the only demon to appear in all 3 chapters of Faith.
True.
Fun note. Again, as we're navigating this underground area, more cultists will spawn in and attack us. But before we go to give the offerings to the statue, we can complete the final step to unlocking the end game. As you're walking through this area, you'll probably notice that there are 2 paintings down these long hallways. One is a depiction of a nun on stage, and the other is the depiction of a nun in front of a church. Of course, we can believe the nun to be Miriam Bell and the church to be Snake Meadow Hill Church.
Yep.
Every time that you pass through this area, each painting will become more and more corrupted, with Miriam's body on stage slowly transforming and becoming a monster similar to the unspeakable, and Miriam's wicked face slowly turning to face us. After these paintings are taken to their full conclusion, this giant floating head will appear and begin attacking John. The spirit is often referred to by the community as the Unholy Spirit. That's because, again, we have the mother and we have the daughter
and the
earlier,
spirit.
and now we have the Unholy Spirit, the full perversion of the Holy Trinity. This floating head will move slowly towards John, and he's pretty easy to fight because all you've got to do is move just off screen and he'll restart his cycle. So you can just do damage and go back and forth between 2 areas, and he's pretty easy to defeat. However, if the floating head makes contact with John for the first time in the game, John doesn't immediately die. Instead, he is teleported to his time at the Yale Psychiatric Hospital. He's in a straitjacket in a padded room with crosses adorning the walls. The objective in this cutscene, since John can no longer use his cross, is to get away from the floating head before it can catch him. If John can get all the way to the end of the hallway, he will then appear back in Garyland, and the boss fight will continue from there. There's no limit to how many times this can happen, but every time that it does happen, the head will move a bit faster. So inevitably, the cutscene becomes impossible at some point. But this is interesting. It gives us insight to John's time at that psych ward, the thing that we've heard hinted about in various letters. And from what little we do see, his time there was not great. After defeating this giant floating head, finally, all 3 parts of the seal will be broken. We're not sure exactly what this means now, but all you need to know is after defeating the floating head, after defeating Tiffany, and after defeating the mother thing down in the basement, we have unlocked the true endgame for Chapter 3. So congratulations. Because we've now done all 3 parts, I also want to mention that letter that seems to be written by Amy that we found in the daycare, how I said that's in reference to Miriam Bell Malthus and Tiffany. It could also be just in reference to the mother down in the clinic, Tiffany, and the spirit could be this unholy spirit, this thing that was floating towards us. I think personally that the interpretation works both ways, that it is representing the 3 baddies of the series that we've encountered so far, and again, the star being Gary, and that it also represents the 3 steps needed to unlock the endgame of Chapter 3. Going back to the statue of Moloch
now what's
and
down there? That's a good that's the big question.
Pass through its stomach into the underground, or the even further underground. Down here we find our final note for the cult acolytes.
Bro, how deep is this daycare? God damn, how long would this take to build, realistically speaking? That's my real question. Who's the architect? Who is the architect that built this? I need him right now. Is he, he's got really crazy designs. Who let him cook?
You are now a Tier 4 acolyte. You have descended beyond anything that could possibly save you. Your words are not your own. Your actions are not your own. You belong, body and spirit, to Gary. Your face itches for the warm embrace of the ritual mask. You long for the blinding pain of the knife. You truly are Gary's chosen vessel. Fear not, only a little longer, and you will experience the second death. Adios, Alma Perdita. Gary loves you.
Anyone who's reading this note is beyond saving. And again, the fact that the cult doesn't only do the horrible things that they do, but they relish in it and love it, pushes to their evil just a little bit more.
Yeah.
We also find another
I think a
interesting
demon made
note
it.
down here.
Probably.
Master of spirits, the body of the mother stayeth suspended beneath the crucible of the profane Sabbath. If thou canst unlock the final secret of the crucible, know ye this. The cross hath the power to weaken the mother, but only someone who is ablaze with purifying fire canst truly destroy her. If thou canst understand these words, thou shalt know the true cost of thy faith.
Keep this note in mind for later.
I feel like that's
we
how
then
we're gonna
enter a
defeat her.
series of long, dark hallways.
Or the demon.
Eventually, at the end of it, we find a lantern. Walking with the lantern, we get jump scared by a bird, which, thanks, Erdorf, appreciate it. Definitely didn't scream first time I played this. And we catch quick glimpses of people watching us through the windows or grates or whatever
It's
these
William
panels
Afton.
are. Eventually,
There's two of them.
another noise startles us to reveal a near headless person walking backwards with what appears to be a mask of Malthus on their face. These are vessels
No.
or worshippers of Malthus.
Chat, bad. Bad. I already know what you're going to say. Bad chat. Stop. I'm stopping you guys ahead of time. Bad.
Have fully gave their body to the demon. We have to run from these things as we use our lantern to navigate out of these underground tunnels. Eventually, we come out of the tunnels and find ourselves, once again, as if there wasn't enough of these in this series, a dark forest. In the center area of this forest, we have a large doorway that is covered by a large seal.
Okay, well, time and reality doesn't work the way that it should be here. Because why is there a forest under a daycare?
We have to venture off the beaten path with our lantern to find the 3 vessels that are keeping the seal intact. After running into each of these vessels, we have to exorcise them, and after all 3 are exorcised, the door will be opened. I absolutely despise this segment because the lantern isn't like a big enough glow to see where things are coming from, so because of that, you kind of just got to figure it out. So you have to move without moving too quick to run into them, and they can spawn in really tricky places where it's hard to get away, and yeah, not a fan. And to clarify, I don't mean not a fan in a bad way, I mean not in a fan in that it's purposefully difficult game design, and I died a lot. One Easter egg that we can find while walking through this dark forest is Gary's cabin. In it, we can find a letter to someone named Jacob.
My dearest colleague Jacob, thank you for your letter. I am delighted to hear of the success of your venture in Pennsylvania. However, it was not enough to persuade me to join your cause. I have no interest in crumbling ghost towns, nor government experiments, nor gibbering behemoths that lurk shamefully in the darkness between worlds. Such matters are not worthy of my expertise.
Interesting.
My methods may be more delicate than yours, but I assure you, they were given to me straight from the source. The Antichrist will seep forth very soon. The second death will consume this world, this pitiful, fleshy sphere, still in its infancy, yet everlastingly too late to redeem. When the time comes, I hope that we may reunite as cohort, albeit not equals. Love always, Gary. P.S. I almost forgot to thank you for the pet. I will keep it outside my private quarters as a guard against intruders.
Okay, that's very much lore drop. So, this other guy, at some point, he saw it as an equal, and it says not as equals anymore, but this is somebody that could probably bring threat to this man, Gary, in some way.
This note and the picture accompanying it are a reference to another game developed by New Blood, the same studio that developed Faith, a game called Dusk. It's funny because in the letter, Gary is telling another cult leader that Gary himself is too important for that other cult's cult activities. Gary even remarks that Jacob has sent him a quote-unquote pet, and Gary says he'll keep it to watch the cabin. Sure enough, upon leaving the cabin, this pet attacks, and we have to exorcise it. This creature is a monster, again, from the game Dusk. In the picture accompanying the note, we can see Gary standing with Jacob and another villain from one of New Blood's upcoming titles. This is really the only part of the entire series that is an altogether Easter egg. Like, there's other cool clues we can find that will somehow relate back to the story, but this one's just for fun and fans of New Blood. After we exorcise all 3 of the vessels, we can head back to the doorway at the center of the forest. When we walk up to the door, we'll be asked if we really want to open it. After John says yes, he steps in to find himself in a dark corridor full of thralls. As John walks through the corridor, Gary once again asks the question, how do you make a portal to hell? John continues to walk, the thralls becoming more infected, more consumed with this demonic force. Gary continues and says, sometimes it waits for the one who has already walked through it. John continues through transformed demons. Gary says sometimes it opens itself in the deepest, darkest room where nobody can find it, before finally stating, sometimes it walks right up to you. John steps forward through the darkness and sees finally Nate and Jason. After all this time, after all this suffering, he's made it to them. But as John stands there bloodied and battered, he hears something behind him and turns. And the scene cuts. Gary's words continue, hello, John. It's nice to finally meet you. This figure with the beard and the red hood, this is Gary Miller.
Okay.
Which means it was also Gary Miller who injected us after the chess puzzle earlier. And now, decades of planning that began all the way back with Miriam Bell are finally coming to fruition as John stands in front of Gary.
That's not
and
Santa.
Now, in this moment, for the last time, we have a flashback to what happened on the night of September the 21st, 1986. After John ran to the basement and found Father Alred dead on the floor, in fear, he called out to God, before then asking anybody to help him. A figure of light appears in front of him, and Gary begs this figure to free him from this, to get him out of this situation. The figure clarifies and says that if John leaves now, Amy will be damned forever. John is the only one who can possibly save this girl before the cult entirely has their hooks in her. But John is so afraid, and he thinks he is so worthless to defeat this creature, that in this moment he makes a deal with whatever creature this is trying to save him, that he will swear off Amy's soul if he's allowed to leave.
Oh no.
I swear it.
And at this, John is allowed to leave the house just as the police arrive. And now we see a bit more of what is pushing all this guilt John has on his head. The reason that after spending so much time in the psychiatric hospital, after spending time with a woman he loved, Molly, despite all of that, he had to go back to that house. And the reason he had to go back
Because
is Amy Martin's death
is on his hands. Yep.
Did John want to be at the front line of this? Did he choose to be the only person who could save Amy Martin? Of course not. But it didn't change the fact that in that moment, he had the capability to save her. He had the capability to perform the exorcism, and he didn't do it. And from there, the cult had a year to do whatever they wanted to Amy. And by the time we see her in 1987, her face is gone, the second death ritual has been performed, and her soul's definitely lost forever. And every bit of that weight falls on John's shoulders.
Yep,
that's the reason in 1987 he ventured out into the woods at night to go back to the Martin household to try to make a difference. John has traveled for years and years.
Talk about good tragic character. Little on the nose, but I like it. I like it.
To try to overcome the evil that he knew from Miriam Bell. And then in 1986, when a young girl needed him most, he got scared. He ran away. And he was so desperate to do so that he made a deal with the devil. A lot of people think that it is God himself appearing here in this vision John had back in the Martin house. And of course, that's what the figure wants to appear as. That's why he cloaks himself in white and speaks with a holy voice. But the idea of this being God never set right to me. For one, why would God want to make a deal that would condemn Amy to the demons?
Not.
And also, the way that the voice speaks and says, swear it, in like a demanding voice, like, I want to hear you say that this girl is left to the demons. I always suspected this, and during my interview with Erdorf, we confirmed that this is in fact Satan. Not a demon, not Malthus, not a high-ranking member of Satan's party. This is the devil himself. His appearance here being a reference to 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 14, when it says, "And no marvel, for Satan himself is transformed into an angel of light." Throughout the entirety of Faith the Unholy Trinity, and really in the real world, but again, topic for another video. Every trick, everything that the devil has at his disposal is just a bastardized version of what God had already set up. What's the symbol of the demons or demonology? Just take the cross and flip it upside down. What's the symbol to some of them? Oh, well, take a star, symbol of God, of the virgin birth and whatnot, and just flip that upside down. What are they called? Their group of 3 leaders. That's a play on the Holy Trinity, the Unholy Trinity. Everything that they have is just a lesser version of what God has already put in place. As a matter of fact, the devil himself is an angel that fell from grace. He is nothing more than a creation of what God has made, and because of that, his symbols are nothing more than a reimagining of what has already been. There's nothing that the devil can manipulate that God did not make. And we see that here in Satan's appearance, he is pretending to be the God, to be the one over all. But the only way that Satan knows to do that is to simply put on the clothes of God, but then speak as himself. To be biting and gnashing, to say swear it, to say that he wants the girl's soul forever. And of course, this all begs the question, in the world of Faith the Unholy Trinity, if sure, this being of light that we see is actually the devil, then where is God in all of this? We'll talk about that in just a minute, but first, let's see where John's at.
I feel like the whole point of God is that he won't intervene, because at the end of the day, it was all still for John at least. I'm hoping that's his name. I don't know. But it was all a choice, right? It was still a choice in the moment. And yeah, there's a little tinkering from, the demon side, but at the end of the day, so far, most of it is from humans fucking around and finding out, You can't exactly say, hey, I'm getting in here or I'm gonna butt into this world because, humans are messing with stuff. It's like, in the day, that is their free will.
After we have this final vision that tells us of John's cowardice, John awakes to see that he is sitting in front of Gary Miller. We are also informed that night is past and it is now the day of the profane Sabbath. Gary sits before us, and I love how unimposing his figure is. He seems to just be an older, balding man with glasses. We know that he has charisma to lead all of these people to the life of evil and debauchery that they've led, but physically, he's just a guy. A normal human being, just like you and me. Gary, of course, has taken a liking to John, considering that Miriam Bell is the reason all of this began in the first place, and at one point John was important to her. So as a sort of favor, Gary says that he will answer 3 questions from John. Now there are a total of 6 questions that can be asked, but again, we're only allowed to ask 3 of them. Or you could do what I did and play through the game multiple times and figure out the answers to all of them, which we'll go over right now.
Thank you.
Of the 3 questions you can ask about the injection, you can ask about Gary himself, you can ask about Malthus, you can ask about the boys, Nate and Jason, you can ask about Amy, and you can ask about the second death. On the injection, Gary says that the purpose of the injection is to prepare one's body for the unspeakable. Or in other words, as we imagined, it's to prepare the body for the second death and for possession.
Yeah.
When asking Gary about who Gary is, after jokingly saying he's a normal human being just like you and me, he clarifies that he is here to prepare the way for the Antichrist, and he's to give the second death as many times as possible. Now, of course, the Antichrist is a figure in Christianity that brings about revelation, or it brings about the events of revelation, Judgment Day, Doomsday, whatever you want to call it. This has been hinted at several times. As I mentioned earlier, when you boot up the game, a verse from the book of Revelations is shown on screen. So Gary is here to make way for all of that, and as mentioned, perform the second death ritual as much as possible. And another one of the questions we can ask him is, what exactly is the second death ritual? If you've stuck around this long, and you're like, oh, some of these concepts are kind of gross, you probably don't want to hear this. So the second death
give
ritual,
it to me.
and this is the
Just-
thing that I
just
said at
give
the
it to
beginning
me.
of the
Tell me.
video, is
Tell
one
me.
of the most brutal things I have ever heard in any horror ever. And ever since I played this game, this is probably the detail that's stuck with me the most. Airdorf even said that when he pitched this idea to a room full of people at New Blood, they asked what was wrong with him. And I'm so impressed with it because there's definitely something wrong with him. So what the second death ritual
All right, tell me.
is Gary, or whoever is holding the ritual, puts the mask on someone and carves out their face with a knife, which we've discussed that.
Yeah.
Well-established ground. But then, so you have to carve out enough that it's kind of deep, that there's like a hole, right? And then you take a living baby, an infant, a newborn, and you pass it through the hole. And you just keep doing that until something comes out the other side. For one of the coolest ideas in body horror I've ever heard. The idea that if this ritual's performed, what would normally just be, gray matter, your face, becomes like a pit, a never-ending pit that you can reach down into, like the idea of reaching past the head and all that, and then something being brought up out of it. Very cool. Very creepy.
Very
At
creepy.
the same time,
Called it. Did you?
Airdorf, is everything okay at home, man? Do you need to talk about, look, you got my number, we'll talk. I hope you're all right. But no, really, the second death is terrifying. I love it and hate it at the same time. Also, between
It's
every
disgusting,
question
but
that you
it's-
ask
it's-
Gary,
it's good.
his face
Fits
will
the-
become more deformed and
It fits the theme.
messed up. But given the gravity of these questions, you're probably not even noticing that. The whole figuring out what the second death does recontextualizes a lot of stuff we saw earlier, especially in Chapter 3. Like, why would Gary own a baby clinic? I don't know, maybe because he needs
Money.
a lot of babies. Why were all
Nope,
of those
nope,
babies
no
crawling
babies.
around in the basement? Take a guess. Why earlier did I say they weren't really performing a lot of pregnancy terminations at the clinic? Because you need them to be very alive, I imagine, for this to work. Also, remember the thing about Tiffany? How she got overzealous and did the ritual herself with 490 souls? Isn't that just
Please. Don't tell me. Don't tell me. No, how? Where do you get that supply? Where do you even get that supply? Where do you find that many children? 490. Oh my god. How many kids? Where do you find? That's an entire neighborhood. That's more than a neighborhood. It's like oh my god. That many kids. The orphanage. Still, even for an orphanage, 400? 400. Over 400. Over 400. Almost 500. In a casual orphanage is crazy. Either way, that is an insane amount. No matter the context. Mid talking points, election prison. Okay, no, stop. Bad, no, bad chat. None of that here. Not even in joke. Nope. Bad.
just a cheery thought? Where do you even get that many? Like, if you had some kind of trip. I don't want to get into the details of it. Oh, it's so awful everywhere you look at it, which is great. Horror is supposed to horrify you. Terror is supposed to be terrible. That's the whole point.
This disgusts me.
But man, we can ask about the demon Malphus, which, as imagined, he is just another preparation for the Antichrist. And again, Alu was brought into the world by Tiffany against the cult's order, so he doesn't really count in the whole prophecy thing. We can ask about Amy, and Amy, as you've probably put together at this point, was a vessel for the second death. Gary clarifying that she'll be back. It also recontextualizes how horrible John leaving Amy to the cult really is. because due to his leaving her, she underwent the second death, and this entire ritual process was used on her. And then finally, we can ask about Nate and Jason. And as you've probably put together at this point,
what do you mean they're illusion? Were they never real? Then I'm assuming Garcia was fake?
I suppose you wish they were real, just like you and Mrs. Martin. That is how I know you would come to me.
Nate and Jason aren't real. They were never seen in the Martin household in any of the flashbacks or the paintings on the wall of Amy and her parents. And in John's flashback, whenever we try to go into the twins' room, he says he can't remember that part. Nate and Jason are not real. They are a projection of John's mind regarding him and Lisa, the two real twins of this story. All of the brief flashes of the twins that we saw was just either the demons playing trick on John or his mind playing a trick on himself. Now, how did Garcia know about the twins? I believe John probably told Garcia about them. After John and Garcia began communicating with each other, it's likely that John informed him, while we've lost Amy, the twins want the two boys, Nate and Jason. To clarify, John fully believed that the twins are real. It wasn't until this conversation with Gary he figured out they weren't.
Yeah.
So John tells Garcia we need to be on the lookout for the twins, and this also explains why Garcia was never able to find them. He checked the foster care system, he checked parent records,
Okay, so
he checked
Garcia's
kindergartens, daycares, what have you, and they never came up. Because again, the twins weren't real. The only evidence we have of the twins existing in this entire story is the letters that Cindy Martin wrote to Bob. Other than that, they're not brought up anywhere. And if you're wondering why Cindy Martin wrote about twins that didn't exist, we will figure that out when we talk about our alternate endings. Because it's Faith, of course, Chapter 3 has alternate endings. After finishing our questions, Gary says that while this has been fun, he has a rapture to bring about. And that now, John will fulfill his role as being a vessel for the second death. The thing he's been primed to do for decades at this point. This boss fight, which is effectively the final fight if you didn't do the side quests throughout Chapter 3, is against Gary, as Gary uses pretty much every boss move from the entire game. He will teleport, he'll move around, he'll move at you fast, he'll throw a spear. There's this one attack he does called Rain of Spiders, which, oh my gosh. So the way the attack works is Gary says Rain of Spiders, and then like the spider things, things that John
you gotta...
in like Chapter 2,
you gotta move out
form
the
he
way.
would turn into. A bunch of those spawn and just start raining across the screen, and if any of them touch you, you get knocked down. This move has been heavily nerfed in updates since I played the game. Effectively, he calls it in less and the spiders are less intense. Because when I played it, Gary could like call Rain of Spiders 3 times in a row and you were just going to die. Like they would cover up so much of the screen, there was effectively no hope. This is also the second boss fight where you don't immediately die after taking contact with the enemy. Third, if you count the babies in the clinic, but I don't count the babies piling up on you as contact. Okay, if you want to count the babies, this is the third time that happens. Because in the Gary boss fight, if you're hit once, you will drop the cross on the ground and you have to crawl to pick it up before Gary gets to you. If Gary gets to you, we're given a short cutscene of John after receiving the second death, implying that he's been fully killed by the cult. And therefore, the rapture, doomsday, what have you, is ready to bring about. But if you get through Gary's stages, if you deal with the Rain of Spiders, this cutscene will play out.
Show it to me. I want to see. I want to see. Yo, my man came in with the shotgun. He came in with the holy bullets, the holy caliber. Oh my god. I fucking love this. The man came in with the shotgun. Yo, Garcia with the clutch. With the clutch. With the clutch. Badass. Oh. Get him, Garcia. Get him. Get him, Garcia.
Father Garcia is the GOAT.
He is the
this
GOAT.
Man said,
the
hey,
GOAT.
you know, you, the demon, may not care about Buckshot, but that flesh bag you're in certainly does. Just the rotoscope of the priest pumping the shotgun is one of the hardest things I've seen in games in a long, long time.
It's almost as hard as Abraham Lincoln trying or killing vampires. All right. Holy
In this
Glock is
moment,
the holy.
and
It's holy
please take a moment
buckshot.
to appreciate it. It's so cool.
It's
But in
cool.
this moment, Garcia tells John that it's nice to finally meet him, again implying that the two have never met in person, they've just communicated through letters. John follows Garcia into the next room, and here we see the altar that we have been removing the seal from throughout each of the 3 days. If you didn't do those previous steps or didn't do all 3 of them, when you get to this final room, there will be a seal and John and Garcia will be unable to stop Gary. But because we did what we're supposed to and we removed all 3 seals, now we have full access to the pit that Gary has jumped into. Garcia tells us to go, to stop Gary, that he'll hold off the demons. And with that, John
Garcia's
dives into the
the
pit
goat.
to finally put an
Garcia's
end to
the
Gary
goat,
Miller.
for sure.
And with that, as we make it to the true end game, we have done all the steps for Chapter 3. We don't have to just end the game at that fight with Gary we just had. We can now finally fight Gary as the main final boss. We can end the game. But at that time, I want to talk about some of the things that have led up to this moment.
Sure.
For one, I want to talk about the other 2 alternate endings you can get, because the one we're about to talk about is by far the best one and the one that makes sense for the story's arc as a whole. But I also want to talk about what's happening in this moment. Garcia and John going to face down the forces of hell, and John diving into that pit. But before I talk about that, let's talk about the alternate endings. For one, there is the really bad ending, where you don't do anything at all. Straight up, so after each day, if you go get in the car and then drive to the location, you have the option to just get back in your car and go home. Like, you're not even doing the normal progression through each of the
You
days.
just don't do anything.
You're skipping even walking into the clinic or walking into the apartments. If you skip at least the last day, this is what happens on the day of the profane Sabbath. John awakes to hear clamoring outside. He goes and checks through the peephole on his front door to see thralls gathered around his front porch. If John waits here too long, they'll break down the windows and attack him. John sprints to his basement to retrieve a key that opens the locked room that he hasn't seen in quite some time. When he gets down to the basement and grabs the key, suddenly this giant caterpillar demon makes its way down the staircase. It hunts and looks for John through the pillars as John has to evade it and make his way back up the stairs.
That's creepy looking.
If John runs into the backyard, he can see the hole in the ground where the thrall summoned this thing. John makes his way back into the house. Stepping outside, John can view the other houses on the street and see that they are in a similar state of damnation, with death and destruction everywhere. When John makes his way back to the door covered with crosses, he opens it to find Amy standing in the room. Next to John, in a pile of file cabinets, is another note.
Yale Psychiatric Institute new patient intake form. Patient name, Ward John Thomas. Age, 33. Sex, male. Ethnicity, white Caucasian. Assigned counselor, Spinell James, PhD.
All right.
Health examination results. Height, 6 feet. Conditions, asthma,
I already read
dormant.
it. I already read
Diminished
it.
mobility from childhood injury to right knee.
Again, another mention of John's time in the hospital. He approaches Amy, who it seems to be in a mock version of the attic back at the Martin household, with a cleared out floor and even a fake window drawn on the wall behind her. John kneels before Amy and asks what she wants, to which Amy replies, "Unforgivable," and a hand reaches out of her face to grab him. John awakes in the woods, and after traveling forward, he finds that he is once again at the Snake Meadow Hill house. Walking into the Martin estate, the house is destroyed. Every room is in a state of disrepair, with the walls and floor tattered. Upon entering each room, John remarks how it should have been him that died, and the Martin family didn't deserve this. Walking into the attic where we once fought Amy, John finds a letter from a Dr. Morris addressed to Bob Martin.
Bob, I wouldn't be breaking client confidentiality like this if we didn't go way back. The situation is really starting to worry me. Cindy's delusions are much worse than she initially let on. I was careful to gradually introduce the reality of the situation to her. You were very patient with how she still spoke about them, the fake birthday parties, etc. I thought we were making progress when I got her to accept that she miscarried and that the twins are gone. But she now seems convinced they are trying to make contact with her and that she can find replacements for their spirits to inhabit. Does that sound familiar? Remember the house we found in that village in Nicaragua? Did you tell her about it? I don't know why you would, but I can't think of any other reason for why she would be talking about things like that. Come by my office as soon as you can. We need to talk about what to do next. Morris.
Now, if you hadn't played the game as far as we have throughout the rest of Chapter 3 and didn't ask Gary the question about the twins, then this would be the revelation that the twins aren't real. But now we also have confirmation as to why Cindy Martin ever believed in the twins in the first place. It seemed that the image of the twins is something that the cult was able to use to manipulate John.
Yeah.
So in order to get this manipulation across, they pervade the mind of Cindy Martin and made her believe that her 2 dead children were still alive.
Yeah, so that story about them messing around with, blood in their hands and everything was all in her mind since the very beginning.
All of this being used to eventually hurt John Ward after he becomes a priest. So now the John in this bad ending is left utterly destroyed. So now John makes his way to the twins' room, the twins that were supposed to be born but never were, and he walks into the room to see their 2 stick effigies standing in front of him. John, utterly defeated, failing to stop the profane Sabbath, and now, allowing the end times to come about, he kneels before the effigies and allows the spirits of evil to take him. He stands there with his arms up as Amy and Michael appear before him and hold him still. The room and everyone in it fades away as John falls into the hands of the unspeakable. And rather than our regular timeline of mortis that we get upon death, this time we are given the phrase damnatio memoriae. Damnatio memoriae is a phrase that, for one, we've seen earlier in this game. When jumping through the different floors to get to floor 7 while in the apartments, it was scrawled across the floor above the hole. Damnatio memoriae is a phrase that was used in Roman government to condemn even the memory of someone. In other words, there was a certain degree of evil a person could reach, either through tyranny or murder of family,
so
or
even
what
the
have
memory
you,
of you
that
may be
it was
condemned.
considered taboo to even remember that they existed. Considering the events that took place on
So how the 11th and, was it 18th or was it 19th? Or is it the 20th? I forget. The 2 legions from Warhammer are being treated. You may not even remember them. Or you will be killed. Cleansed. Not even, their thought of those legions may not be even spoken.
floor 7 of the apartment buildings, it makes sense why that term applies there. But in this ending, it applies to John because John had a chance to redeem himself. He did something utterly vile, something almost unspeakable, allowing a young girl to die because he wasn't brave enough to fight back. And now, through the events of the 3 chapters we've played, he's been given a second chance. But here in this ending, he refuses it. He doesn't try again. He gets in his car and goes home. And because of that, not only does John die, but his memory is a profanity. But of course, this isn't the John Ward we know. The John Ward we know went to the clinic, went to the apartments, and went to the daycare. If the player does not do the side quest to defeat the other members of the Unholy Trinity, then when they get to the Crucible, the Unholy Trinity's seal will be over the door, meaning that John and Garcia cannot step into it. With this ending, John and Garcia hold back the demons for some time until Garcia can drop the Crucible onto the doorway.
Oh, bro,
in this
look
ending,
at
Garcia
Garcia,
clarifies
though.
that they have not defeated Gary, they've just kept him at bay for some time. Father Garcia says that the unspeakable and Gary is still out there, and that the world and Garcia need men like John now more than ever. John says that a year ago, when he was at the Martin household, he was tricked by the devil. Again, this lines up with the interpretation of the being of light being Satan himself. And John says he doesn't know if his faith can be restored, if he'll ever be powerful enough to stop these forces of evil. Depending on the player's actions, Garcia either tells John that he wants to be John's mentor and he can teach him to grow in the faith, or Garcia points his shotgun at John and says John doesn't have a lot of options.
Damn, what a pose.
Again, here, John exhibits some kind of bravery, but yet he doesn't have the full faith, or doesn't know that he has the full faith to do what needs to be done. But of course, that still isn't our ending. In our ending, John is standing there before the door of the Crucible, and he jumps in. Now, think about everything that's led John to this moment. All the way back in the 1930s, Miriam Bell caused some kind of satanic something or other to kill 6 kids. She later comes back as the leader of this orphanage at the same church and kills another 4. The sole survivors of this are John and Lisa. Something horrible happens to John and Lisa. It seems that the two of them were poised even then to become a victim of the cult one day, groomed into this place of being a vessel for demons coming out of hell. We know that Lisa was going to be one because Tiffany blocked off her door so that Gary couldn't use her for one. And John, as seen what happens if you lose in the boss fight against Gary earlier, would also become one if the cult had their way. So for years, John has been nothing more but cannon fodder for the end times.
Yeah.
And he has done everything in his power to stop it. He became a priest, he went out on exorcisms. And what did he end up doing on his very first exorcism, as he told Father Alred? He got an
Sold the
entire
soul
family killed,
of
he
the-
got the other priest
Yeah.
killed, and he got kicked out of the ministry. Because again, after making a deal with the devil that the devil could have Amy's soul, he ran into the arms of the police. A police force that, of course, didn't believe him, so they throw him in a psych ward. While there, from the records we've seen, he was tormented. He knew Amy was in there. He knew that her possession was his fault. And of course, he was eventually exonerated for the murders as, DNA evidence or research would prove that he was innocent, but he was still thought to be crazed. In a letter that John writes to the hospital, it is in a tone and cadence that explicitly does not sound like John. As a matter of fact, it sounds a lot like Gary. I believe that even while John was in the institution, they needed to use John for the second death ritual. So
they got him
Gary
out.
wrote the letter to get him out, and probably pulled some political strings as well. So then John is let out of a psych ward only to eventually be meat for this cult to use. But during that time, he tries to find peace. He's now out of the ministry. He's no longer a priest. He's renounced by the Vatican. So now that his vows no longer matter, he falls in love and marries a woman named Molly. And maybe for a few months, everything was okay until
His guilt.
he began to have these dreams about Amy. He could not get over the fact that he condemned
And
this
so
girl
he had to
damnation
go back
because
to the
of his
house,
own cowardice.
starting
so
everything.
he leaves Molly, he tells her that he has to do this. He writes that letter exclaiming that regardless of what I told you, I'm not crazy, I know what I saw. And he leaves. We see that Molly leaves him because of this. I mean, who could blame her? And then after all of the events we've seen through chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, here John is again in front of the crucible. The man who ran away now staring down the gun barrel of hell, and he jumps in. I posed the question earlier, where is God in this story? Because the existence of demons inherently implies the existence of God, right? And the only depiction of God that we had was Satan in disguise. So what is the Almighty's influence? What does he have to say about all of this? And one of the details I love about Faith so much, and it actually
I
gave
would say, I mean, in all seriousness, right? The cross is working. The cross is killing the demons you ran into. The cross is vanquishing everything he's fought so far. Right? So it's not like he's not helping or his presence isn't felt, right? Maybe that's just make it a mechanic in the game, but he's run into all these entities and he's vanquished them with that cross. So there is an aiding force of some kind helping him around every corner.
me the idea before I even talked to Erdorf that the creator has to be a believer, because, just as seen in the game and just as seen in life, God does not fix people's problems by taking their problems from them.
Yeah.
Instead, he makes them strong enough to take their problems on their own. This is seen time and time again throughout Bible stories, especially out of characters who otherwise are undeserving of the grace they receive. Characters like David, who had an affair and then murdered the woman's husband, was called the man after God's own heart before and after that event. Paul, the father of missions, to many the greatest Christian who ever lived, spent the first half of his life hunting down people and massacring pastors and selling women into slavery. While John Ward had stepped very far away from any path of redemption or any path of light, he has now been given the means to come back. I mean, think about the events of chapter 2 that we saw. He has a dream by coincidence that tells him everything he needs to know about where this cult came from, how Miriam Bell and what his own connection to it is. He is given the contact of Father Garcia, and supposedly Garcia is also given dreams of John, so the two of them meet over these visions or by chance dreams that they're having in their sleep. And not to mention that every single demon, no matter how big or how strong that John has come across,
They get vanquished
is
by the
able
cross.
to be defeated by just the little picture of a cross.
Yes,
The influence of God in
yes.
this story is the entire story. Every step of the way, John has had that cross there to fight
And
his
it's
battles.
always-
And while, yes,
it's
it is
always
the cross that
works.
is defeating the demons, it's John who's holding it. The John Ward we saw at the beginning of this story and the John Ward we see now are two very different people. So here on the precipice of damnation, this Father Ward jumps into hell. We find ourselves where else but back at the Martin household. The Martin household is covered in notes everywhere. The majority of them simply read,
Gary loves you. Gary is a normal human being, just like you and me.
again reaffirming the cult statements over and over. But there's one note at the bottom of the staircase that connects all the dots and makes this entire story make sense.
March 18th, 1934. Miriam is ready. We will perform the ritual according to her instructions tonight. March the 19th, 1934. We successfully gave the second death to Miriam. We have been passing living newborns through the newly made portal as quickly as we can get them. So far, there has been no response from the other side. March the 23rd, 1934. After several days of sacrifices, we finally got a response. A tiny hand reached out from the portal. We took the hand and pulled out a baby boy. It appears to be a normal human baby, just like you and me. We named it Gary.
Oh.
And now it all makes sense.
Yep.
Why did Miriam begin this cult and for some reason Gary now runs it? Because Gary was the point of the entire cult in the first place. Gary is not a human and is instead the demon Astaroth. In several sort of extracurricular beliefs around things like Christianity or Judaism, Astaroth is believed to be one of the chief princes of hell, sometimes even being called part of the demonic trinity between Lucifer, Beelzebub, and Astaroth. One of the most powerful demons, and as Gary mentioned earlier in the story, here to bring about the Antichrist. So Miriam, so wicked and evil all the way back then, had the second death performed on her, and the demon that came out of her face was Gary Miller, which is why Gary refers to her as his mother. And all these years later, Gary has planned to bring about the Antichrist by using the same technique on John, Amy, and whoever else he can. But not if John has something to say about it.
Yeah.
We make our way
Or
up
Garcia.
to the attic to see it is now a sort of altar. Hanging at the back of the altar is the body of Miriam Bell. And in front of Miriam is Gary, now in his true form, the demon Astaroth. Gary informs us that the original plan for all of this was Malphus and Gary would join inside of the vessel of Miriam. However, her form was too old and broken. So the two of them had to pick a new vessel to possess. This vessel was to be the young Amy Martin. John's gotten in the way of that plan. Astaroth says it doesn't matter, that he will bring about the profane Sabbath anyway. He just has to get rid of John first. But before he does, he lets him in on a little secret.
Before I go, I will let you in on the secret.
What's the secret?
Gary does
I don't think that's much of a secret. I'm not gonna lie. I could have guessed that one anytime.
Boss fight begins, and again, I know this has been nerfed now, but this was at one point one of the hardest things I've ever done in a game ever. Gary will randomly charge at you from around the ring. He will set traps in the way so that you can't move. He'll also randomly dart from one side of the wall to the other. Avoiding all of these moves, eventually we will get Gary through his first phase, which means everything gets worse because now Malphus will join in on the fight and fire arrows from either side of the screen. And once again, if we're hit by anything, we're dead. On the bright side though, dealing damage to one of them deals damage to both of them. So you can hit Malphus or Gary to cause a lot of hit points really fast.
Wow,
Eventually,
you barely
after some
dodged
time
that.
and probably a lot of Mortis, it will seem that the two will be defeated, as they will begin to fade away and then join what's left of them inside the body of Miriam Bell. And the screen gives you a congratulations, you done it, you beat the entire game.
No, they didn't, because they're gonna, that body's not gonna be able to sustain both of them, but it's gonna be enough for them to conjoin, maybe momentarily.
Of course you haven't, because then the amalgamation of Malphus, Gary, and Sister Bell appear. This entire part of the fight is effectively a bullet hell. Miriam will cause these skulls to fly at you, that blow up and make more skulls. She'll shoot arrows down at you from the top of the screen. There will be these rings of fire that appear, all of which you have to dodge while trying to deal as much damage to Miriam as possible.
Ooh,
and if
left.
all of this seems impossible, it normally would be if it wasn't for the fact that now John can take a lot of damage. See, now John is renewed. He's become a different man. And every time that he gets hit during this fight, he says a word of prayer to God. John can take a total of 10 hits before he's dead.
Wow.
As he ends with faith without works is ... If he gets hit one more time, then he dies, which is mortis, or death. But John's become much stronger. He's
You
much
take 10 hits. That's damn, bro.
different than the man who began this battle against Gary so many years ago. Eventually, after dealing enough damage to Miriam, for a brief second, Malphus and Gary will split off from her, leaving her exposed. Now during this stage, the cross won't do anything. It seems that perhaps she's unstoppable. But remember that note we found at the bottom of the statue in Garyland? The one that said, and I'll read it again, "The body of the mother stayeth suspended beneath the crucible of the profane Sabbath."
Right.
That's Miriam. That's where we're at right now.
Yeah.
"If thou canst unlock the final secret of the crucible,
gotta
know ye
holy
this.
fi- or the fire.
cross hath the power to weaken the mother, but only someone who is ablaze with purifying fire
Yeah.
can truly destroy her. If thou canst understand these words, thou shalt know the true cost of thy faith." This note, whoever left it, whatever left us, was giving us a hint as to how to defeat Miriam. And at the bottom of the stages are 2 torches. So, just like John does in the alternate ending to the prologue
You gotta
of
light
chapter
yourself on
2,
fire.
he runs to the fire and sets himself ablaze before jumping into Miriam. And this move causes her form to explode. In the explosion, Malphus disappears. No form for him to inhabit. He's now banished back to hell. John himself is covered in blood and sinew. And then as he stands there with Gary, Amy floats down in front of them.
Oh.
Gary tries to enact the ritual to take over her form for the profane Sabbath.
Pull out the cross. Pull
but
it out.
Gary has failed. The vessel doesn't work. There weren't enough spirits. The Antichrist cannot come. Hell will not win today, and it's Gary's fault. So, as Gary approaches Amy, a hand reaches out of hell and brings him back in, punished to the damnation he could not bring forth. And now that the profane Sabbath is ended, that the second death has passed, and that ultimately the cult's actions have meant nothing, Amy's soul returns for just a moment. And her and John share this.
Amy, I'm so sorry. I couldn't save you.
The rights of yeah.
Amen.
The cross in his hand, once again, a
It's
bright
gold.
gold. With Amy at rest and the
Yes.
cult destroyed, Garcia and John
Oh
make
my
their way out.
wow. There was a shootout out here, goddamn.
The daycare. We see that there was a bloodbath outside. It seems that the cult, in an act of desperation, knowing that they had lost, had attacked the police, and the police fought back, leaving no survivors. John and Garcia begins to talk. While Garcia says that they have defeated a powerful evil, the unspeakable is still out there, and he still needs to be destroyed. In this ending, Garcia tells John that he's become much stronger, that he's a much powerful warrior of the faith, and that Garcia needs men like him. As they're talking, Lisa shows up. Lisa tells him that this can all be over, that the two of them can go together and leave this life behind, and maybe for the first time, start a life anew. The overbearing presence of Miriam Bell and everything the cult has done to them is now gone. They can simply walk away from this. And from here, the player gets the choice if he goes with Lisa or Garcia. If the player goes with Lisa, the two of them join hands, and it's implied that John and Lisa set out to start a life of peace away from the torment they've known for so long. And if the player goes with Garcia, they also join hands in a very cool dude bro fashion.
Yeah!
And it's assumed that the two set
Let's go demon hunting, baby! Let's go demon hunting! Give me that shotgun, Garcia. I could rack it up a couple times. We're about to go kill Satan.
out to destroy the unspeakable once and
That's
for all.
right. You
Now, Airdorf has
son of a
clarified that
bitch.
he doesn't see either
I'm in.
option as a bad ending. It's definitely not a bad ending if John decides to set off and live a life with Lisa. I mean, the two have been through so much at this point. How could they not want to set off and be satisfied with leaving this life behind, especially considering how young they were inducted into this demonic plan? And while I don't think that's a bad option at all, to me, the canon ending is siding with Garcia. Because the journey of these 3 games, or 3 chapters of one game, have been John deciding if he is worthy to fight the evils of this world. And the recognition that while he was cowardly and undeserving of the power of God then, he certainly has become a warrior against evil now. Again, the transformation of the cross from gold to silver to bronze, but then back to gold.
Yeah.
In my mind, Garcia and John set out to defeat the unspeakable and the forces of evil by whatever means God will allow.
Let's go fight some
Let's
demons.
go fight some
The game
ants.
ending with the 2 of them driving
love
off in
it.
a vehicle as the credits roll.
Let's
and
go
think about
fight
how
some
far we've come.
demons.
This young orphan boy, an orphan boy who watched his mother Meredith die, something that he was so afraid of, a demon would one day taunt him about it in the Martin house. And then this boy who is thrown into centuries and millennia of demonic planning for the end times for the rapture. And he was always meant to be nothing more than a vessel for it. But in spite of that, he became a warrior. This orphan grew up to save his sister, to save Garcia, to defeat the forces of evil in all of their forms, from Astaroth to Alu and everyone else who stepped in his way. And he did it, of course, through the power of God, but God gave him the power to do it himself. This child who became a priest was able to defeat the devil, to sign his soul over to him, and then defeat him once more. All of that was done by Father John Ward. And all that it took was a little bit of...
Hey! Bum, bum, bum. Wow! That was great! I love this! I love
So
this
if it
too.
wasn't apparent enough, I'm a huge fan of this game.
So am I.
And you should be too.
Yes, I am.
Not only do I think it's, a great example of horror and a great example of story writing, but it's a lot of fun. The art direction, the design, the rotoscoping, it drips with passion in every way. And it's something that I definitely think more people should be attuned to. Like, yeah, this game's got a lot of attention. It got nominated for a lot of game awards. I think critics are tuned in to how good it is. But I'd love to see more general audiences catch on to it as well.
Yeah.
Again, it's a unique style, but one that I believe deserves to be looked at. So that's why I made this video.
It was good, it was good, it was
check
good.
them out. Check out the game. I'll link it somewhere down in the description. Go follow Airdorf on Twitter. And then if you've heard all this now and you want to hear our interview where we talk for hours about this game and his inspiration and him as a writer and there was a lot we talked about in the interview as far as story beats and symbolism and stuff like that in the game that I didn't even cover here. So if this was interesting to you, go check out all of that for sure.
Maybe I'll check it out one day.
But I believe, I'm trying to think if there's anything else I need to plug. Go check out the second channel. If you're interested in my first reaction to Faith, I have my whole VOD from my initial playthrough over there. Yeah, go check out Faith the Unholy Trinity. A fantastic game that's definitely deserving of your time. And Airdorf, I think I can speak for myself and most of the horror game community when I say thank you. We really like it. In our interview, Airdorf discussed plans for future chapters of Faith, as well as future horror projects he has in mind as a whole. So there has never been a better time to get on board. So again, check out Faith, go play it, enjoy it, and show the creator some love. Airdorf definitely deserves it. On my personal note, I want to say that I apologize for the lack of uploads as of late. I know it's been over a month since I've uploaded anything.
It's $15 for Faith. I might play it one day. I might get it.
But for those of you who know my social media, but my wedding is end of this month, so that has taken up a lot of time and planning because, of course, I want it to be as perfect as could be. I also have the Stalker film, which is wrapping up, which there should be some announcements and trailers for soon, so stay tuned for that. But there's a lot of management on our end about that film right now, so that's another project, as well as other projects that I can't even talk about yet because they're all under hush-hush quiet, that I can't wait to eventually tell you all.
This is a good watch.
And confirm and say, no, I haven't been lying for the past year. I am working on other stuff. But yeah, there's a lot on my plate, but I don't want the quality to suffer. I didn't want to make this like I have no idea how long this video is going to cut to, but I didn't want to make this like 3 or 4 different videos. Because that's lame. Why would I do that? I wanted to put the time into it. I want to put the passion into it. And hopefully that came through. And thank you all for bearing with me. And of course, a massive thank you to my editor, Caitlin, who did all of this. She is the best. I'll link her Twitter in the description as well. Go over to Twitter and show her some love because literally, I promise you, this video would not be possible if it wasn't for her. So thank you, Caitlin. Appreciate it. I believe that should do it for now. I'm not going to promise any new videos soon because of the wedding or whatnot. But before the end of the year, I got some cool ones that will be coming out that hopefully you'll enjoy. But I believe that should do it for now. Check out AG1 in the description. Very cool company, very good to work with. They're great to me, and they make a great product that I personally enjoy and endorse, so check them out. I believe that should do it for now, but I just want to say thank you for watching. I hope that you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!
Alright, that was us reacting to A Game Too Scary for 3D Hidden Story of Faith, the Unholy Trilogy. That was, wow, 2 hours and 30-minute recording. Thank you for the head pats, appreciate it. That was quite a marathon for a 4-hour, 23-minute. We got it done in 2 parts though, so you know what? I very much enjoyed it. I'll probably play it soon, YouTube. And YouTube, hope you guys enjoyed my reaction. I will catch you guys later, and that's gonna be all for me. Bye bye, my lost souls.